Chapter 1867. As soon as Ji Tianqing retracted his hand, the golden glaze man collapsed to the ground and fainted. The great soul-sucking technique that he had just used was a famous forbidden technique from ancient times. Using this secret technique, one could directly invade the other party's spirit and memories to search for information. It was very powerful and tyrannical. The weaker martial artists who had their spirits sucked would most likely lose their lives. Even those with relatively strong souls would find their souls in chaos, and they would become delirious and deranged. Thus, the great soul-sucking technique was known as a forbidden technique. Under normal circumstances, Ji Tianqing would not use it lightly. However, the target of this technique was a demonized foreign race, a blood guard nurtured by the ancestral demon god, so he did not feel burdened. Today, the orthodox great soul-sucking technique had long been lost. Only a few incomplete techniques remained, but they were still regarded as ultimate techniques in the martial world. What Ji Tianqing had used was the most orthodox great soul-sucking technique, which was infinitely profound. He had seen countless images and information from the Golden Glaze powerhouse's memories, and he understood the whole story. This Golden Glaze man had originally been one of the strongest powerhouses in the southern continent. He was the emperor of the Golden Glaze race, and he controlled millions of Golden Glaze people. In the southern continent, there were only 7 or 8 primordial spirit powerhouses who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. But half a year ago, 2 tribulation-transcending realm demons had used some unknown method or treasure to break into the southern continent. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses had wantonly slaughtered tens of millions of people on the continent. The Golden Glaze race was one of the victims. Not only had millions of their people been killed, but countless geniuses and elite generals had also died in battle. In the time of crisis, the Golden Glaze Emperor had no choice but to take action and resist the 2 demons. Unfortunately, he could not even withstand 2 moves from his opponents before he was severely injured and fainted. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses did not kill him. After kidnapping him, they captured 2 other primordial spirit powerhouses from other races. The Golden Glaze Emperor and the 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses were taken to Jianghu continent and brought back to Dark North Mountain. After that, the 3 of them were sent to an extremely terrifying abyss of blood, and after 49 days of suffering and torture, they were tempered into their current state. Although their strength had greatly increased, their defense and combat strength had become more powerful, and they could even release terrifying demonic secret techniques. They were still able to do so. However, their martial Tao foundations had been destroyed. They were like combat puppets, and they no longer had the chance to break through and advance. They could only obey the orders of the demon race and were forced to wear similar red robes. They were named the Blood-Robed Guards, and they fought for the demon race with their lives on the line. Although Emperor Jin Lu's experience sounded tragic, Ji Tianqing did not sympathize with him. After all, after becoming a Blood Strike Guard, he had become a demon that only knew how to kill. In the past few months, this person had followed the demon race's experts into battle. He had broken through more than 30 cities and slaughtered more than 200,000 civilians. Even the water of the Eastern Sea would not be able to wash away such a bloody sin. Then, Ji Tianqing used the same trick again. He shot out a beam of blazing divine soul light that enveloped the ice bear. The giant ice bear struggled with all his might before his divine soul was invaded and he fell unconscious. Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and quickly read the ice bear's divine soul memories. After 10 breaths, he found the answer. The ice bear's experience was almost the same as Emperor Jin Lu's. Also half a year ago, 2 mysterious demon race experts had invaded the northern continent and killed their way into the ice bear's territory. This ice bear expert was the current emperor of the ice bear tribe. He ruled over millions of miles of territory and had tens of millions of ice bear tribe members. Unfortunately, he was no match for the 2 demon race experts. After a few exchanges, he was severely injured and fell unconscious. When he woke up, he was already brought back to North Underworld Mountain. He and 4 other primordial soul stage experts were sent to a dark, bloody, and terrifying abyss where they endured 49 days of tempering and demonization. In the end, he lost his self-awareness and became a violent, bloodthirsty bear that only knew how to kill. Under the leadership of the demon race experts, he wantonly massacred the citizens of the Luoshui divine kingdom. He had already committed a heinous crime. When Ji Tianqing retracted his hand, the Ice Bear Emperor was also unconscious, just like Emperor Jin Lu. One is the Ice Bear Emperor of the northern continent, and the other is Emperor Jin Lu of the southern continent. There were also a dozen or so blood-robed guards who came from different continents. The ancestral demon god's methods are truly vicious. He actually captured these foreign powerhouses from different continents and refined them into demonic puppets. However, the Shenwu continent and the other continents have long been sealed by the gods, so they are not connected. What method did the ancestral demon god use to allow those demon lords to travel between the continents? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and muttered with a solemn expression. Since the ancestral demon god can allow those demon lords to travel between the eastern, southern, western, and northern continents, does that mean he can also send demon lords to the profound sky continent? He suddenly thought of this question, and his expression became even more gloomy. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. No. I have to figure out what's going on as soon as possible. At this moment, Shohei pointed at the unconscious Emperor Jin Lu and Ice Bear Emperor and asked in a deep voice, "Master, how should we deal with these two foreign powerhouses?" Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and waved his hand. They have all been tempered by demonic secret techniques and have long been demonized. They have lost their minds. I will try to purify them first. If not, I can only kill them to prevent future troubles. With that, he activated the power of the heaven-mending orb and waved his hand to release a sacred white light that drilled into Emperor Jin Lu's body. The dense white light released a mysterious and vigorous power that quickly dispelled the demonic qi in Emperor Jin Lu's body. However, Emperor Jin Lu had already been completely demonized. Under the purification of the white light, his flesh and blood immediately corroded and festered, emitting thick purple-black smoke and emitting powerful toxins. In just a few breaths, he had turned into a large pile of black ash, leaving not even a trace of bone or flesh. Only a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog was left floating in the sky. In order to prevent the poisonous fog from spreading and killing the people of Kangyi City, Ji Tianqing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow it and let it slowly purify it. Next, he shot out another white light that enveloped the Ice Bear Emperor's body. Like Emperor Jin Lu, the Ice Bear Emperor had also been completely demonized. Under the purification of the sacred white light, its 30-meter-tall body quickly corroded into ashes and billowed with poisonous smoke. After a while, it also turned into a cloud of black ash and turned into a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog. Ji Tianqing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow the poisonous fog. Only then did he clean it up. He flew into the sky and overlooked the entire Kangyi City to observe the situation. The war had ended long ago, and the remnants of the demon race had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1868. Seeing that the situation in Kangyi City had stabilized, Ji Tianqing was ready to leave. Anyway, Ning Sangyan would be in charge of the aftermath. He had no time to waste here. Swoosh! He put away the black dragon and flew to Ning Sangyan with Ji Bai and Shohei. Ning Sangyan was giving orders and assigning tasks to several generals guarding the city. When he suddenly saw Ji Tianqing, he hurriedly bowed and greeted him. He then introduced Ji Tianqing to the generals. The generals had also heard of Ji Tianqing's legendary deeds. They were all flattered and bowed in excitement and awe. Ji Tianqing waved his hand indifferently and said, "You don't have to be so polite. Saving the people is more important. City Lord Ning, you will deal with the aftermath. When you report to Luotian Mountain, don't mention that I have been here." Why is that? Ning Sangyan was stunned for a moment, his face full of confusion. He couldn't understand. Wasn't Ji Tianqing the pride of Luotian Mountain and the #1 god's disciple in the Divine Kingdom? He had made such a great contribution, but he didn't report it to Luotian Mountain. Did this young Master Ji sneak out? Seeing that Ning Sangyan was secretly guessing, Ji Tianqing explained, "I have a heavy responsibility on this trip. I must keep my whereabouts a secret and must not be leaked." Ning Sangyan suddenly understood. He quickly nodded and said, I understand. Don't worry, young master. After a pause, he thought of another thing and asked tentatively, by the way, young Master Ji, when I was chasing after the remnants of the ghost clan, I caught a captive. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly ordered, where is he? Bring him here quickly. I want to interrogate him personally. Ning Sangyan immediately understood and waved to a general beside him. The general quickly turned and left. After a while, he came to Ji Tianqing with a blood-stained and crippled demon clan expert. Reporting to young Master Ji, we have already extorted a confession by torture. But this guy refused to give up and refused to reveal any information. The middle-aged general reported the situation truthfully, his tone filled with hatred. Let it go. Ji Tianqing ordered expressionlessly as he sized up the demon with a sharp gaze. This was a male demon. He was more than 3 meters tall, and his whole body was covered with purple hair. He was wearing a black armor. This person had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. His arms had been severed at the roots and his body was a bloody mess. He was already on his last breath. When the middle-aged general released it, it immediately let out a muffled roar from its bloody mouth. It even used its last bit of magic power to escape into the ground. Ji Tianqing flicked his finger and shot out a golden light, which immediately turned into a golden chain and firmly bound it. It couldn't move and could only lie on the ground, panting weakly. Ji Tianqing didn't bother to waste time to force a confession. He directly used the Grand Spirit's summoning technique and waved his hand to release a white light of divine soul, which enveloped its body. It rolled its eyes and fainted on the spot. Ji Tianqing invaded its divine soul and began to search through its memories. The demon expert's name was In Tuesday. He had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. He was the chief of a particular tribe and had lived for more than 800 years. 2 years ago, when Dark North Mountain was unified, he submitted to the Great Fiend Sage and became an elite combat general. Thanks to his ancestors, he was greatly appreciated by the Great Fiend Sage. He was like a fish in water under the Great Fiend Sage and learned a lot of secret information. His divine soul memories could be said to be as vast as the sea. They were like the river of stars in the sky, boundless and endless. When Ji Tianqing's consciousness came into contact with the river of memories, he immediately came into contact with boundless information and saw countless memories. His consciousness followed the river of memories and went against its flow, searching through Entu's experiences and memories in reverse order. Especially the memories of the past 2 years, they were of utmost importance to his search. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing checked through Entu's memories of the past 2 years. After analyzing and summarizing, he finally learned some secrets and found the information he wanted. Things were just as he had expected. All the changes in the North Underworld Mountain started 2 years ago. Before that, Dark North Mountain had been in hibernation for 10,000 years. Few demons stepped out of Dark North Mountain. Within Dark North Mountain, the 4 great fiend sages were constantly divided. They each had their own territories and ruled over hundreds to thousands of tribes. Only when the ancestor god returned and entered the ancient divine abyss of Dark North Mountain did the division that lasted for 10,000 years end. The 4 great fiend sages were forced by their ancestors to enter the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's baptism and bestowment. No one knew what the 4 great fiend sages experienced in the divine abyss. The demons only knew that when the 4 great fiend sages walked out of the divine abyss, they became even stronger. Furthermore, they were unexpectedly united and obeyed the ancestor god's orders. What happened next was self-evident. The 4 great fiend sages consolidated their factions and gathered large amounts of resources and bravehearts. They began sharpening their blades in preparation. A year ago, the 4 great fiend sages followed the ancestor god's orders and plans and gradually launched an attack on the Luoshui divine nation. 8 months ago, the great fiend sage entered the ancient divine abyss alone to receive the ancestor god's orders. A few days later, the great fiend sage returned to the sacred palace with an ancient secret treasure. He gathered a few demon monarchs under his command and chose 2 of them who were powerful and had special constitutions. The great fiend sage bestowed the ancient secret treasure to them and gave them a special mission. After that, every month or so, the 2 demon monarchs would bring back a few strange experts of different races. Those experts of different races would be sent to the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's secret refinement. In a total of 8 months, the 2 demon monarchs brought back more than 40 experts of different races. After those experts of different races were refined and demonized, they became the infamous blood-robed guards. And 2 heard the conversation between the great fiend sage and the 2 demon monarchs and knew that those experts of different races were experts that they had captured from other continents. Only then did N2 know that there were other continents in the world. He was very curious about the outside world, so he looked for opportunities to get close to the 2 demon monarchs and ask them for information. When the 2 demon monarchs saw that he was being taken care of by the great fiend sage, they did not hide anything from him and told him a few things. N2 gradually understood that the ancient secret treasure that the ancestor god had bestowed upon them was called the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle. This treasure could travel through the void in different spaces, and its effects were extremely powerful. However, only tribulation-transcending powerhouses with special constitutions could use this treasure. Furthermore, it could only be used twice a month. Within 8 months, the 2 demon monarchs had traveled to several continents outside of the Jianghu continent. Their movements were very smooth, and they could freely travel between continents. Every time, they would capture a few experts of different races. There was only one continent that was extremely strange. It seemed to be protected by some kind of divine power, and even the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle could not enter. Chapter 1869. Ji Tianqing had learned many secrets from Antoine's soul memories. Of course, he could guess that the strange continent was the Tianxian continent. As for why the 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle could not enter, he had some doubts. Although he had some guesses, he could not confirm the answer. Fortunately, there is only one 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle, and it cannot enter the Tianxian continent. That's why I'm relieved, Ji Tianqing murmured to himself, revealing a relieved expression. Although he had recovered a lot of Kenshin's memories in the Jianghu continent, he still cared about his family. However, he was still concerned about his friends and family on the Tianxian land. He was unwilling to see the devil elite warriors invade and start a massacre on the Tianxian land. At this time, Ning Sanyan saw that Ji Tianqing had finished casting the spell, so he asked, "Sir Ji, how do you plan to deal with this ghost?" "Of course I'll kill him." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent out a sacred white light that covered Antoine's body. Antoine's flesh was instantly corroded by the white light and quickly turned into a pile of black ash. Ji Tianqing straightened his clothes and cupped his hands towards Ning Sanyan. "City Lord Ning, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Ning Sanyan and the other generals quickly bowed and said in unison, "Farewell, Sir Ji." Ji Tianqing took Ji Bai and Shohei and flew into the sky as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the distance. Ning Sanyan and the others stood in place and watched Ji Tianqing's group disappear into the horizon. Only then did they withdraw their gazes and go about their own business. After leaving Kangyi City, Ji Tianqing summoned his black dragon and rode it towards the north. North of Kangyi City, 8,000 kilometers away, was the border, where a vast mountain range stretched endlessly. In less than an hour, the black dragon had crossed the vast mountain range and left the territory of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. As they continued to head north, they saw towering mountains and ancient forests along the way. This area was very vast, spanning tens of millions of kilometers. It was called the 100,000 Mountains. To the northwest of the 100,000 Mountains was the continent's largest peak, Tianzhu Mountain. In the northeast, it was connected to the gloomy North Underworld Mountain. In other words, between the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the North Underworld Mountain, there was only 100,000 great mountains between them. 6 hours later, it was already late at night. The black dragon was flying high in the sky when Ji Tianqing's divine sense suddenly detected something strange. 100 miles to the right, in the pitch-black night sky, there was a 1,000 feet long flying boat, rushing towards the south. The gigantic flying boat was emitting billowing demonic qi, and its target was the border of the Luoshui divine kingdom. It must be the demon army of the North Underworld Mountain rushing to the border of the divine nation to join the war. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. It would have been fine if you hadn't met me, but since I've bumped into you, then it's your bad luck. He muttered in a low voice and rushed to the right in a flash. In just a few breaths, he had quietly caught up to the pitch-black flying ship. A black and red flag with a ferocious demon god totem was hung on the huge airship. The body of the flying ship was also engraved with many demon gods and asuras, making it look ferocious. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and vaguely detected that there were at least 2,000 demonic auras in the flying ship. Among them, one of the strongest auras had reached the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The other dozen or so auras were weaker, but they were all at the Essence Soul realm. The remaining 2,000 auras were all demon warriors at the Spirit Tempering realm. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to draw the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Holding the sacred sword with both hands, he slashed with all his might. Heaven-cleaving sword. The Sword of Burial of Heaven lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a giant golden sword that was 1,000 feet long. It slashed down from the sky towards the flying ship. Kaboom! Amidst the loud noise, the giant golden sword slashed the flying boat in the middle, cutting it in half on the spot. Dazzling bloody light and purple flames burst out. Although the flying ship was a low-grade Tribulation Transcendence artifact, it was protected by a powerful array. But in front of Ji Tianqing, under the Sword of Burial of Heaven, the flying ship was as fragile as paper, unable to withstand a single blow. Hundreds of demon warriors were flung out of the broken flying ship and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The dozen or so demon race experts did not expect to be attacked so suddenly, and were also in a panic. Before they could react, Ji Tianqing took advantage of the situation to pursue and slash out sword lights that filled the sky. Sword of Shattering Sun. 18 giant golden swords, carrying invincible divine power, ruthlessly slashed the two halves of the flying ship. Immediately, the two halves of the flying ship exploded into countless pieces and scattered in the night sky. At least 300 demon race soldiers were killed on the spot by the sword lights or the power of the explosion. Those who were lucky enough to survive were all injured, either lightly or heavily, and were fleeing in panic. Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei hurriedly rushed up, spewing flames that covered the sky and slashing out endless sword lights, wantonly slaughtering the demon race soldiers. The dozen or so demon race experts roared angrily and rushed over. Half of them resisted Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei, while the other half joined forces to besiege Ji Tianqing. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle in the night sky, fighting with all their might. A loud rumbling sound echoed fiercely between the mountains. The dazzling brilliance of magic power illuminated the night sky for 100 miles. This battle with a great disparity in strength only lasted for a quarter of an hour. The strongest demon race commander, who had the strength of the second layer of the Tribulation Transcendence stage, could not withstand 3 moves from Ji Tianqing, and his body and soul were destroyed. The dozen or so demon race generals of the primordial spirit realm did not last long, and were killed by Ji Tianqing and the others. As for the 2,000 or so demon race warriors, they were even weaker and not worth mentioning. Ji Tianqing and Ji by Shohei slaughtered them like wheat, and a sword fell down a large number of them. After a quarter of an hour, more than 2,000 demon race warriors were all annihilated, turned into pieces of flesh and blood, and scattered in the mountain forest. Ji Tianqing did not even bother to collect the spoils of war. After taking back the holy sword, he continued to rush to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the next 20 days, Black Dragon flew 5 million miles continuously. Along the way, they also encountered several dangers, and were besieged by some ferocious demon beasts. After all, the 100,000 mountains was uninhabited, and it was the gathering place of all kinds of fierce demon beasts. According to ancient legends, a divine dragon had once appeared here. That evening, the sun was setting in the west. The dark golden sun was about to set in the west, and the world was covered with a layer of dim sunlight. The endless mountain range seemed even more vast and lonely. Black Dragon was flying thousands of feet high in the sky. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back, and Ji Bai and Shohei stood behind him. In front of everyone, about 500 miles away, a hazy gray shadow appeared at the end of the sky. That gray shadow was incomparably majestic, like a pillar supporting the sky, traversing between heaven and earth. The gray shadow stood in the mountains, and the top was submerged by the sea of clouds, as if it was connected to the sky. Seeing the figure of the giant peak, Ji Bai and Shohei both showed a rare smile. Chapter 1870. Ji Tianqing stood motionless on the black dragon's back as he stared at the gigantic figure in the sky. Although his face was expressionless, his deep eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Without needing Ji Bai and Shohei's reminder, he knew that the gigantic figure was Tianzhu Peak. In fact, his familiarity with Tianzhu Peak far exceeded that of Ji Bai and Shohei. 1,000 years ago, he had traveled from west to east across the entire Shenwu continent, and had been in the world for more than 20 years. Along the way, he had challenged the powerhouses and top geniuses of various races and countries. He had won every battle without a single defeat. In the end, he had arrived at this vast mountain range. After searching for half a month, he had finally found the legendary backbone of the continent, the pillar that supported the heavens, Tianzhu Peak. Then, he had taken his few followers and occupied Tianzhu Peak, establishing a training ground and a sacred palace. Tianzhu Peak was isolated between heaven and earth. Although it was the highest peak and backbone of the entire continent, it could not gather the world's spiritual energy. Thus, he had used his ability to change the heavens and the earth, changing the layout of the 108 peaks around Tianzhu Peak. The 108 peaks formed a Big Dipper astral array and a Big Dipper spirit array. With Tianzhu Peak as the center, the area within 100,000 kilometers was enveloped by these two large arrays, forming a rarely seen sacred land of martial arts. Later, he had made a bold declaration that he would challenge all the martial saints in the world on Tianzhu Peak. In the next 20 years, the martial saints of various races had come to challenge him on the peak of Tianzhu Peak. Without a doubt, he had defeated all the martial saints who had come to challenge him, and his name had spread throughout the Shenwu continent. From then on, Kenshin's name had spread to every corner of the Shenwu continent, and he was revered by everyone. Every day, countless aspiring youths and martial artists from all over the world would rush to Tianzhu Peak to become Kenshin's disciple. Tianzhu Peak had become even more prosperous, and it had become one of the top sects in the world. Its power was second only to the three divine kingdoms. However, after he had left, the former prosperity had gradually withered away. Today, Tianzhu Peak had been reduced to a second-rate power and had been forgotten by the world. Ji Tianqing stood on the black dragon's back and looked at the gigantic figure that was getting closer and closer. Countless memories surfaced in his mind, and his mood became somewhat lonely and sorrowful. Ji Bai and Shohei saw that he was silent and sensed that his aura was rather bleak, so they both shut their mouths. However, neither of them could guess what Ji Tianqing was thinking. The two of them thought that Ji Tianqing was in a bad mood because he was worried about the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After 100 breaths of time, the black dragon flew to the vicinity of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and stopped 1,000 feet above the ground. As he got closer, Ji Tianqing could see more clearly. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains in front of him was somewhat different from when he left back then. This giant mountain that covered an area of 1,000 miles and was tens of thousands of feet tall was no longer surrounded by spiritual energy like it used to be. Back then, there was a clear river at the foot of this giant mountain, like a belt of sparkling and translucent pearls. The entire mountain was shrouded in a thin layer of five-colored spiritual light. Even in the dark of night, the five-colored light would still flicker. Between the steep cliffs and the white sea of clouds, groups of spirit cranes would fly past from time to time, letting out crisp and high-pitched cries. At the peak of the mountain, there was a five-colored waterfall that contained spiritual energy, pouring down from the cliff, like a rainbow hanging on the cliffs. Not only that, the almost straight cliffs were covered with vines and various small trees. Those very spiritual vines and small trees would bear fragrant and delicious spirit fruits, exuding a refreshing aroma of green wood. In short, the pillar of heaven's mountains in the past was like a paradise on earth, like a divine mountain where the gods lived. But now, the entire giant mountain was somewhat dark, losing the luster of spiritual energy, as if it was covered with a layer of dust. On the bare cliffs, there were only a few vines and trees, exposing large patches of gray-brown rocks. The foot of the mountain was covered with withered yellow leaves, and even the river that coiled around the pillar of heaven's mountains had long been blocked by boulders and mud, turning into a lifeless pool. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and a thought flashed through his mind. As long as the great formation of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends is still operating, the surrounding 100,000 miles is the holy land of martial arts, a paradise. But in this situation, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is so thin. Could it be that the two great formations that I set up back then have been destroyed? He had a bad premonition, and his face became increasingly cold. The black dragon carried him and flew upwards, passing through the sea of clouds at a moderate speed, flying towards the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. The pillar of heaven's mountains was really too high, more than 20,000 feet above the ground. It was covered by the sea of clouds. The mountain that surpassed the sea of clouds was still 80,000 feet high, definitely the highest in the world. Standing in the sea of clouds and looking at the surroundings, one could see a very spectacular scene. Below everyone's feet was a white sea of clouds, and there was nothing in all directions. Only the pillar of heaven's mountains stood in the sea of clouds, its peak connected to the blue and flawless sky. In the process of flying upwards, Ji Tianqing recalled some past events. Back then, I chose to set up a training ground here, firstly, because this place is the pillar that supports the heavens, symbolizing the unique status of being alone and far away. Secondly, the pillar of heaven's mountains is 10,000 feet high, the mountain is straight and steep, and even ordinary birds can't reach the peak. Ordinary people want to learn from me, but they can't even reach the peak, so naturally, they will retreat, avoiding the trouble of taking the test. Indeed, back then, Kenshin's name spread all over the world, and countless geniuses came to learn from him. But those who could reach the peak were all outstanding people of the same generation. Those who were able to pass the 3 tests were even more exceptional martial arts geniuses. Therefore, none of the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains were mediocre. Not long later, the black dragon flew to the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains against the biting cold wind. The peak of the mountain was an open space with a radius of 300 miles, and the terrain was quite flat. Actually, when Kenshin came here, the peak of the mountain was uneven, and was full of jagged rocks. The height of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was actually 10,300 feet. In Kenshin's view, 9 was the limit, and exceeding it was as bad as falling short. A height of 9,999 feet meant that it was unparalleled in the world, and was at the peak of martial arts. Therefore, with a sweep of his sword, he shaved off 4 feet of the mountain peak, turning it into a flat piece of land. In the middle of this piece of land, he built an ancient holy city. The holy city was not big, but there were 18 magnificent palaces, and 36 magnificent houses. Around the ancient holy city, there were forests, herb gardens, mountain peaks, and so on, and there was also a beast garden for spiritual beasts. Back then, there were more than 1,000 disciples and odd job workers living in the holy city, as if they were immortals who were isolated from the world. How carefree and happy. This place was also the holy mountain closest to the sky, and one could reach out to touch the sky and pluck the stars. It was the most unique place. In Kenshin's heart, this was his favorite cultivation holy land, and even the god kingdoms of the 3 martial gods could not be compared to it. However, after 1,000 years. Chapter 1871. The forests, herb gardens and mountain peaks around the holy city were all withered and bleak, without much vitality. Especially the spirit beast garden in the east, there were many rare and precious spirit beasts. Not only were there groups of spirit cranes, there were also heavenly horses. But now, in the huge spirit beast garden, there were only a few spirit beasts. The gate and walls of the spirit beast garden were dilapidated, with broken bricks everywhere, and the ground was full of holes. The situation of the herb garden in the west of the holy city was not much better. The large formation that protected the herb garden had already disappeared, leaving only a few scattered small formations that were still flickering with a weak light. Most of the flower beds and herb gardens had turned into a grayish-brown wasteland, with many holes and ravines on the ground. Only a few innermost herb gardens were still planted with some herbs and spirit flowers. In short, Ji Tianqing stood on top of the mountain peak and looked around, only to see a scene of decay and withering. He could not believe that this gloomy, dilapidated, and gray holy city was the holy land of martial arts that he had opened back then. Ji Bai and Shou He had been standing behind Ji Tianqing, deeply feeling the change in his mood. Their mood was also somewhat heavy. With a gloomy face, they explained, "Master, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was definitely not like this in the past. This place was a top holy land of martial arts 1,000 years ago. It's just that in the past 1,000 years, many forces have been secretly plotting against us, causing our sect's power to continuously weaken, resulting in today's situation." Ji Bai and Shou He knew that the current situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was really worrying. It had already reached a critical point. The two of them were absolutely loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Naturally they would not despise it, let alone have any thoughts of betrayal. However, some disciples with weak willpower had already started to escape. Therefore, when the two of them saw Ji Tianqing's grave expression, they were worried that Ji Tianqing would despise the decline of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing did not say anything. He rode the black dragon over the forest and landed in the holy city. The layout of the holy city was rather peculiar. It was circular and sat on top of the mountain. The outer circle was 36 ancient houses, and the inner circle was 18 imposing palaces. In the middle of the holy city was a dojo with a radius of 100 miles. It was surrounded by many palaces and mansions. The huge dojo was paved with dozens of different kinds of stones, all of which were extraordinarily effective spirit stones and gemstones. The ground was dark green in color and was engraved with patterns of great formations. This formation with a radius of 100 miles was created by Kenshin and was known as the Firmament Formation. The Heavenly Dome Formation was the core of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It had 81 transformations and could transform into all sorts of formations with extraordinary effects. In the middle of the dojo stood a black stone tablet that was thousands of feet tall. It was like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. Without a doubt, the towering black sword steel was based on the Sword of Burial of Heaven. It was also the totem of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Under the huge sword steel was a pedestal with a radius of 1,000 feet. There were many patterns and seal characters engraved on it. The lines of bold and powerful characters were also written by Kenshin. They were about the righteousness of the way of the sword and the rules of Tianzhu Mountain. Even after thousands of years, the black sword steel was still intact. It added a sense of vicissitudes to it. The black dragon landed on the dojo. Ji Tianqing looked at the sword steel. After looking at it for a while, his expression became much gentler. No matter how much the Pillar of Heaven's mountains declined, no matter how disappointing the disciples were, the sword steel was still intact. At the very least, the dojo and the sword steel had been preserved, which was a blessing in disguise. Ji Tianqing stood under the sword steel and stared at the pedestal with a complicated gaze. He looked at the patterns and words on the black stone wall. The lines of bold and powerful characters emitted an unparalleled domineering aura and sword intent. Even after thousands of years, the ancient characters seemed to have come alive. They made people not dare to look at them directly. They were filled with reverence. As a master, I will not hide anything. I will not hesitate to die for my disciple. Only then can I have a long history. These words came from Kenshin. They were written before the rules of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It was the general outline of the 36 rules of the sect. 1,000 years ago, the martial masters and disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains always remembered these words and engraved them in their hearts. Therefore, 1,000 years ago, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was known as the #1 sect under the heavens. Ji Tianqing silently recited the general outline of the sect rules. His gaze gradually moved up and looked at the sky along the sword steel. Suddenly, he raised his head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. The endless river flows to the east, the waves wash away the heroes. Right and wrong, success and failure vanish in the blink of an eye. The holy mountain is still here, the sunset is still red. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter on the river, accustomed to the autumn moon and spring breeze, meet again with a pot of turbid wine. How many things have happened in the past and the present? Ji Tianqing opened his arms and laughed wildly. His tone contained a strong sense of desolation and carefreeness. The black dragon, Ji Bai, and Shohei looked at his back with complicated expressions. They felt the endless sense of desolation and their hearts became heavy. The burial of heaven also flew out from Ji Tianqing's body and turned into a black stream of light. With a xiao sound, it drilled into the huge sword steel. Suddenly, the 1,000-feet-tall ancient sword steel seemed to come alive. It emitted a dazzling cold light and let out a sword cry that pierced through the clouds. Ji Tianqing waved his big sleeve and stood proudly under the sword steel. His long hair fluttered in the wind as he shouted with a solemn expression, "The sea turns into mulberry fields, the stars move. The divine splendor of the past is gone, but I have returned from reincarnation. 3,000 disciples bring peace to the world, 100,000 divine swords suppress the heavens." Along with the vigorous sound waves, a vast and mighty, formless aura swept out like a gale and engulfed the entire dojo. The 10,000 feet tall pillar of heaven's mountains, as if it had a soul, obeyed his command and yielded to his pressure. It actually shook 3 times. At this time, a white-haired Taoist wearing an apricot-yellow Taoist robe and holding a golden horsetail whisk rushed over with a few elders in purple robes. When everyone stepped onto the dojo, they saw Ji Tianqing, the black dragon, Ji Bai, and Shohei. They also heard Ji Tianqing's desolate laughter. Especially the last few words, it was like thunder piercing their ears, deafening their ears. The white-haired Taoist's body suddenly trembled. His footsteps stiffened and he froze on the spot. An incomparably shocked expression appeared on his old face. His eyes widened as if he saw the most inconceivable thing in the world. He was so excited that his whole body trembled. Mas. Master? The white-haired Taoist was so excited that his beard trembled. He muttered to himself. His old eyes were red and wet. His legs went soft and he almost knelt down to pay his respects. The few elders in purple robes were still confused. They only saw the white-haired Taoist's expression change and did not know what was going on. One of the elders angrily glared at Ji Tianqing under the sword steel. He even shouted with a dignified tone, "Who is making a racket here? How dare you be rude to our sect's sacred sword?" As soon as he finished speaking, the white-haired Taoist suddenly turned his head and glared at him fiercely. He angrily shouted, "Bastard! Shut up for this old man." Chapter 1872. The few elders were puzzled. They did not understand why the white-haired Taoist had such an intense reaction. The sword steel in the middle of the training field was the sacred sword totem of the pillar of heaven's mountains. It had a sacred meaning. That unfamiliar white-robed youth was actually shouting insolently under the holy sword. This was simply too disrespectful. Even the few elders saw Ji Bai and Shohei following behind the white-robed youth. Everyone could guess that the white-robed youth could be the successor of Kenshin. But in everyone's opinion, since he was the successor of Kenshin, he should be respectful towards Kenshin and the sacred sword. But the white-haired Taoist was the leader of the pillar of heaven's mountains. Even he did not get angry, nor did he scold the white-robed youth. Instead he showed a protective attitude. This made everyone even more puzzled. Why would the yellow dragon immortal have such a reaction? Just as the few elders were bewildered and secretly puzzled, the white-haired Taoist quickly rushed to the center of the training field. His expression was very complicated. He was full of anticipation, but also a little uneasy. His eyes stared at the white-robed figure. In a short 10 breaths, everyone arrived under the 1,000-feet-tall sword steel. Ji Bai and Shohei came back to their senses and quickly greeted everyone. "Greetings, great immortal and elders." The two of them respectfully bowed and then stood at the side, waiting for orders. Ji Tianqing's emotions gradually calmed down. He turned to look at the white-haired Taoist and the few elders. When he and the white-haired Taoist looked at each other, their pupils shrank, their eyes flashed with a touch of splendor. Especially the white-haired Taoist, his body trembled, his eyes widened, and he let out a low roar in his heart. It's him. It's really him. It's definitely Master. That appearance, that aura, that gaze, it's definitely the same. The few elders had joined the Pillar of Heaven's mountains later. They had not seen the original body of Kenshin. But the white-haired Taoist was Kenshin's follower and guard-come-disciple. He was very familiar with everything about Kenshin. Even after 1,000 years, he could still clearly remember Kenshin's gaze, aura, and every move. At this moment, the white-haired Taoist's old eyes welled up with hot tears. He could no longer hold back the excitement and sorrow in his heart. He bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Unfilial disciple Huang Long greets Master. Ever since the Sword God left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Huang Long had been missing his master for the past 1,000 years. Especially after the news of the Sword God's death spread, Huang Long was even more devastated. However, he remembered his master's teachings and shouldered the heavy responsibility of protecting the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. No matter how much pain he felt, he had always persevered. No one knew how many hardships and sufferings he had endured in the past 1,000 years. No one knew how big of a blow the news of the Sword God's death was to him. Now that Taoist and Taoist was the heavens and earth, and Taoist not feel the heavens and earth. The yearning and remembrance that had lasted for 1,000 years had caused his state of mind to completely fall apart. At this moment, he felt as if he had returned to 1,500 years ago, when he first climbed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and became Kenshin's disciple. That was why he performed a disciple's salute in front of everyone. His deep bow contained too many emotions. Other than himself, only Ji Tianqing could understand it. Ji Bai and Shohei were dumbfounded. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist, their eyes full of shock. The 5 elders were also stunned. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist and couldn't help but exclaim. Great Immortal! What are you doing? Great Immortal, please get up. You've got the wrong person. That's Kenshin's successor. The elders reminded the Huanglong Taoist. 2 elders even reached out to help him up. However, the Huanglong Taoist was a martial saint. He didn't move at all and maintained his bowing posture. Who could help him up? Ji Tianqing also looked at him with a complicated gaze. He looked at his old and white Taoist robe, his white hair that reached his waist, and his aged face. His heart was heavy and filled with emotion. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and suppressed his complicated emotions. He smiled and said, Huang Long, we haven't seen each other for 1,000 years. How's your cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra? Master didn't personally guide you. You're not slacking off again, are you? Ji Tianqing's voice was gentle and calm, but there was a sense of pressure. When the Huanglong Taoist heard this familiar voice, his body trembled. He couldn't help but burst into tears. 1,500 years ago, when he was cultivating with Kenshin, he often had to wait for a long time to see Kenshin. Every time he saw Kenshin, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation. Especially in the last 20 years, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra every time. However, the Imperial Sword Sutra was an incomparably profound sword technique. His cultivation progress was very slow. When he met Kenshin, he was scared witless. He was afraid of being scolded by Kenshin and even more afraid of disappointing Kenshin. Since Kenshin left, he thought that he would never hear these words again in his life. However, he had never imagined that after 1,000 years, he would once again hear those familiar words. Moreover, they were exactly the same as before. He raised his sleeve to wipe away the tears on his old face. He replied with a trembling voice, Master, disciple has already comprehended the first 7 levels of the Imperial Sword Sutra. Now, I have reached the 8th level. Ji Tianqing showed a gratified smile and nodded, not bad. The 7th level is the biggest threshold. Once you enter the 8th level, you can hide your sword in the void and travel 1,000 miles. The 2 of them, one old and one young, were like master and disciple, conversing with each other in a serious manner. The 5 elders, Ji Bai and Shohei, had long been at a loss. They were all speechless and stunned on the spot. Everyone's expression and eyes were very strange. But no one dared to speak and interrupt this strange scene in front of them. The elders looked at each other and shook their heads. They were in grief as they discussed with each other. Sigh, the pitiful great immortal misses the martial ancestor too much. He actually treated that person as the martial ancestor. Crazy. They are all crazy. The great immortal has become muddle-headed. Even that kid has gone crazy. We can't let them go on like this. If the disciples of the sect see this, what will happen? Yes. The great immortal is the only remaining martial saint in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. He is also our teacher. We can't let him be humiliated and teased like this. That kid is the martial ancestor's successor in vain. He is actually so rude, it is too disappointing. Just as the elders were secretly discussing, Ji Tianqing had already raised his hand and helped Huanglong Daoist up. Huanglong Daoist looked up at his face. His old face was filled with excitement and respect. Ji Tianqing looked at him kindly and said with a smile, "All right, now that you are a 1,000-year-old monster who has become an immortal, how can you lose your bearing? Don't let the juniors see you as a joke. No matter what the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain is today, since I have returned, I will purge the enemy and restore the glory of the sect." Huanglong Daoist nodded and said with a firm tone, "Huanglong has long known and always believed that a godly person like Master will never fall. You are destined to move unhindered in the universe and be the only one in the world." Chapter 1873. In the entire Jianghu mountain, the Huanglong Daoist was the one who understood Kenshin the most. It was because he understood Kenshin the most that he was unable to accept the fact that Kenshin had already fallen. For the past 1,000 years, he had been pondering. How could an unparalleled god like Kenshin fall? He had also been fantasizing that perhaps on a certain morning, that peerless figure in a white robe would descend from the sky and descend upon Jianghu mountain once again. 100 or 200 years ago, the Huanglong Daoist had once revealed this idea. As a result, many elders and deacons felt that the great immortal had become muddle-headed. He actually had such a ridiculous imagination and hallucination. After the news spread, the disciples of Jianghu mountain were all discussing this matter in private. In everyone's eyes, the great immortal had also become a crazy old immortal. Seeing everyone's reaction, the Huanglong Daoist no longer expressed similar thoughts. After a few decades, everyone gradually forgot about this matter. However, the few elders did not expect that now that Kenshin's successor had arrived, the great immortal's old habits had resurfaced. Everyone looked at the great elder and secretly transmitted their voices, "Great elder, quickly make a decision." The great elder, Nye Tianqian, was a tall and sturdy white-haired elder. His square face was bronze-colored, and he looked very upright and dignified. He frowned and ordered in a deep voice, "Feng Ping, Lang Jing, the two of you bring the great immortal back and comfort him. This brat who doesn't know etiquette, I will personally teach him a lesson." The fourth elder, Feng Ping, had once gone to the divine kingdom of Taihao and had a face-to-face conversation with Ji Tianqing. He had a good impression of Ji Tianqing. He had never expected that Ji Tianqing's first visit to Jianghu mountain would cause such a huge disturbance. After receiving the great elder's order, Feng Ping and Lang Jing looked at each other and walked to the Huanglong Daoist's side. The two of them did not care that the Huanglong Daoist was talking. They supported him on both sides and dragged him away. "Great immortal, this is not the place to talk. I will bring you to the main hall. Great immortal, please come to the main hall. This disciple has already ordered people to prepare the spirit tea." The Huanglong Daoist frowned and glared at Feng Ping and Lang Jing. With a stern tone, he shouted, "What are you two doing? This old man has just met with Master. How dare you obstruct me? You two little bastards, quickly release this old man." But the more he struggled, the more certain Feng Ping and Lang Jing were that he was crazy. Without any explanation, they dragged him and turned to walk towards the conference hall. At the same time, Grand Elder Nie Tianchen led the second elder and third elder to Ji Tianqing, their faces filled with rage. Brat, you're the lucky one who obtained Grand Master's inheritance. Nie Tianchen stared sternly at Ji Tianqing and said in a deep voice, we've heard about you a long time ago, but due to the current situation, we didn't summon you. I didn't expect you to be so ignorant and impolite. You've just arrived at Tianzhu Mountain, and you haven't even paid your respects to Great Immortal and Grandmaster, yet you pretended to be Grandmaster and teased Great Immortal. How should you be punished? As he spoke, Nie Tianchen released an invisible pressure from his body and pressed down on Ji Tianqing. The second elder and third elder stood on his left and right. They also glared at Ji Tianqing and released a strong sense of pressure. However, Ji Tianqing stood there with an indifferent expression. He looked at the three of them calmly, without the slightest regret or fear. The pressure of the three elders had no effect on him at all. Seeing that the situation was not good, Ji Bai and Shohei quickly knelt down beside Ji Tianqing and pleaded with Nie Tianchen. Grand Elder, please calm down. Young Master Ji is new here and doesn't know the rules of our sect. Grand Elder, please forgive young Master Ji. Before they finished speaking, Ji Tianqing released an invisible force and lifted them up, straightening their backs. Ji Bai, Shohei, this has nothing to do with you two. Just follow behind me. Ji Tianqing said with an indifferent expression. He walked past the three elders and walked towards the meeting hall. Ji Bai and Shohei froze for a moment. They didn't dare to follow Ji Tianqing, but they were supported by an invisible belief and hurriedly followed. The three elders were actually ignored by Ji Tianqing. The three of them became even angrier. Nie Tianchen suddenly turned around and glared at Ji Tianqing's back. He shouted angrily, "Stop! You little brat, how dare you be so arrogant!" The second elder and third elder also opened their mouths and sternly reprimanded Ji Tianqing for being arrogant and rude. Ji Tianqing stopped and with his back facing the three elders, he said indifferently, "The three of you have offended Grandmaster, which is already disgraceful. Considering that you are young and entered the sect late and didn't know, I will not argue with you and forgive your crimes. But this is the last time. If you do it again, you will be punished according to the sect rules." A deep and forceful voice reverberated in the dojo, emitting a shocking pressure. When his voice fell, Ji Tianqing walked away and walked towards the meeting hall without looking back. The three elders stood in the same place and were stunned for a long time before they came back to their senses. Recalling Ji Tianqing's words, the three of them were so angry that they laughed. "Ha ha ha. We offended Grandmaster? This brat is really crazy. Does he really think that he is our sect's Grandmaster? Because we are young and entered the sect late? This is ridiculous. Despicable brat, how dare he tease us like this? I will not let him off easily." The three of them shouted angrily and hurriedly chased after Ji Tianqing. They wanted to take him down on the spot and punish him severely. But at this moment, the sword steel in the middle of the training hall suddenly lit up with a sacred golden light, releasing an invisible divine power that suppressed heaven and earth. Swoosh! The invisible divine power descended from the sky and instantly suppressed the three elders. Suddenly, the three of them could not bear the divine power of heaven and earth and were immediately forced to kneel on the ground in a row. The three of them were terrified and looked at the sword steel in disbelief. Then, they looked at Ji Tianqing's back. The sacred sword has shown its spirit? How is this possible? This has never happened before. What's going on? The sacred sword has released a mighty divine power to punish us? How can this be? Could it be that the brat and Grandmaster? Just as the three of them were discussing in shock, the invisible divine power suppressed them again and forced them to kneel on the ground. No matter how you looked at it, the three of them were kneeling on the ground and respectfully watching Ji Tianqing leave. As a result, the three elders' expressions were even more terrified and their hearts were in turmoil. Oh my God! After 1,000 years, the sacred sword has shown its spirit? It's over, it's over. The sacred sword is our sect's totem. It can't be wrong. It seems that we have really offended Grandmaster. Great Immortal knows Grandmaster the best. He can't be wrong. That white-robed young man, could he be Grandmaster's reincarnation? The three elders looked at each other and discussed uncontrollably. Could it be that we are wrong? If so, we have offended Grandmaster. This is treason and we will be expelled from the sect. He said just now that we did not know, he will spare us this time. If we do it again, we will be punished according to the sect rules. Chapter 1874. A moment later, the sword steel retracted its invisible pressure. The three elders heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. After the incident just now, the anger of the three elders had dissipated. Instead, they were filled with awe and doubt. After exchanging a glance with each other, Nye Tianxian rose to his feet and led the two elders toward the conference hall. In the north of the training hall, there was an ancient bronze palace that covered an area of thousands of feet. The roof of the palace was covered with golden glazed tiles. They used to be dazzling, but now they were gray and dim. This ancient bronze palace was the most majestic palace in the Pillar of Heaven mountain. It was called the Pillar of Heaven Palace. More than 1,000 years ago, the main hall was the meeting hall of the sect. The backyard was the bedroom of the founder, Kenshin. The current Pillar of Heaven Palace was no longer as sacred and majestic as it used to be. The steps and pillars in front of the main hall were also covered with mottled patterns. When the three elders entered the main hall, they saw Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai Shohei standing in the middle of the hall with respectful postures. The fourth elder Feng Ping and the fifth elder Lang Jing stood in the corner of the hall, quietly observing. Ji Tianqing stood at the head of the table, silently looking at the high platform, bronze throne, and stone wall. On the platform with a radius of 100 feet, there was a large bronze throne that had not been sat on for more than 1,000 years. That was Kenshin's exclusive throne. Ever since he left, Huanglong Daoist had not sat on it. During the meetings, Huanglong Daoist only dared to sit on the left side of the table. In his heart, his master, Kenshin, would always be supreme. At this moment, Ji Tianqing returned to the old place. Standing in front of the bronze throne, he looked up at the stone wall behind the throne and sighed with emotion. There was a painting on the stone wall. There were 2 lines of words written in bold strokes. In the painting was a young man standing alone on top of the clouds. His left hand pointed to the sky, and his right hand held a sword pointing to the ground. Although the painting was not very clear, he could still see that the godlike young man was quite similar to him. He stretched out his hand to caress the bronze throne and slowly paced around it. On the right side of the throne, there was a bronze stone platform with a dark green vine on it. Even after 1,000 years, the 3-feet-long vine still contained a boundless vitality. Its skin was still fresh, and there were even signs of sprouting. This vine was no ordinary item. It was an ancient vine that he had plucked from the longevity sea, and he named it the longevity vine. More than 1,000 years ago, when he taught his disciples, he never used the sword of burial of heaven. He always used the longevity vine instead of the holy sword to demonstrate the profound meaning of the sword art. In addition, the longevity vine had another function, and that was, to punish disciples. He would use the longevity vine to punish anyone who violated the sect's rules or was punished for other reasons. When the longevity vine whipped his body, the pain would seep into his bones, leaving a deep impression on him. However, it would not leave behind any scars. The power of immortality contained within could heal all kinds of injuries and pain. Not only had the Huanglong Daoist been whipped by the longevity vine, but so had the white dragon god and the chess saint, Xia Wudao. Ji Tianqing reached out and picked up the longevity vine, rubbing it with his palm. The longevity vine was also intelligent. It sensed his aura and lit up with a dense green light. In just a few breaths, 2 tiny sprouts sprouted from the dark green surface of the vine. Seeing this, the Huanglong Daoist was even more excited. His eyes shone brightly. Upon seeing this, Nye Tianxian and the 2 elders' expressions flickered drastically as they began to discuss among themselves via voice transmission. He, He actually picked up the longevity vine and made it sprout. Oh my God! Are our eyes playing tricks on us? This is definitely a miracle. For more than 1,000 years, no one other than the great deity could pick up the holy vine. Our Grandmaster has really shown up. The three of them were shocked, but they did not dare to make a sound. They walked quietly to the Huanglong Daoist and stared at Ji Tianqing with shining eyes. After a long time, Ji Tianqing stopped reminiscing and put the longevity vine back on the bronze lampstand. He swung his loose white robe and sat calmly on the bronze throne. In that instant, the dim bronze throne actually lit up with a layer of hazy green light. The hall, which was originally dark and gloomy, became as bright as day. What was more amazing was that hundreds of ancient lamps on the walls of the hall that had been extinguished for thousands of years were reignited. Above the dome of the main hall, tens of thousands of light spots lit up. There were more than 90,000 gemstones, all shining with a dense white light. They gathered to form a huge star map, as if the sky was filled with stars. The bright starlight shone down and illuminated the entire hall, making it look like a dream. Everyone felt as if they were in the starry sky, and the sun, moon, and stars were within reach. Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai and Shohei were amazed, and their eyes were filled with excitement and worship. The three elders were also stunned. They looked up at the vast star map, and their hearts were filled with shock. Ji Tianqing's reaction was the calmest. He only glanced at the star map, and then withdrew his gaze. After all, the star map was personally arranged by him. The structure of the star map, the order and position of the 90,000 gemstones, he knew it like the back of his hand. At this moment, he was sitting on the bronze throne, bathing in the bright starlight. His body was emitting a faint divine light, like a real god. Huanglong Daoist immediately knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. He solemnly shouted, "Welcome back to Tianzhu Mountain, Master." Ji Bai and Shohei were stunned for a moment, and quickly knelt down and shouted respectfully, "Welcome back, Grandmaster." The three elders were suddenly embarrassed. They stood there with complicated expressions, and were somewhat at a loss. Huanglong Daoist had already knelt down, and if the three of them didn't kneel, it would be rude. However, they were still observing Ji Tianqing, and were not sure if he was Kenshin. It was even more difficult for them to accept this unbelievable result. For them to kneel to a young man in his 20s and respectfully call him Grandmaster, it was too difficult. Just as the three of them were hesitating, Huanglong Daoist turned his head and stared at them with a dignified gaze. He shouted in a low voice, "Unfilial disciples, hurry up and kneel." Second elder and third elder's hearts trembled. They braced themselves and knelt down. Only great elder Nye Tianchen did not kneel. He hesitated for a moment, and then he gathered his courage and made up his mind. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a solemn expression and asked, "Young Master Ji, please forgive me for not being able to accept this result. As everyone knows, our sect's Grandmaster Kenshin fell 1,000 years ago. Now, after 1,000 years, you suddenly appeared. Even if you look similar to our Grandmaster, you can't be our sect's Grandmaster. Please give me a reasonable explanation." Second elder, third elder, Feng Ping, and Lang Jing all had the same thought. They still felt that it was a dream. Hearing Nye Tianqing's question, the four of them quickly echoed, "Yes. I hope young Master Ji can explain clearly. This kind of mysterious thing only exists in myths and legends. How can it be true?" Chapter 1875. Ji Tianqing also understood that it was almost impossible for the five elders to accept such a ridiculous thing in such a short time. However, these five elders were very important. They were the mainstays of Tianzhu Mountain. Although the Huanglong Daoist was in charge, the five elders were still in charge of all the affairs of Tianzhu Mountain. If he could not convince them, he would not be able to control the situation of Tianzhu Mountain. No matter what plan he had, it would be difficult to implement it. The Huanglong Daoist also understood this, so he was very anxious. He glared at the five elders angrily and shouted in a dignified tone, "What are you doing? Are you trying to force me to abdicate or rebel? I am Master's eldest disciple, so I know him the best. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, this old man can guarantee with his life that this person in front of you is the Sword God, the founder of our Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Master once ascended to the upper realm and became the divine king who controlled the gods. How could he have fallen? Now that Master has reincarnated and returned to Jianghu mountain, he will lead everyone to rise again. How dare you treat our founder like this? What are your intentions? The Huanglong Daoist was really angry. An invisible pressure burst out from his body and suppressed the 5 elders. The 5 elders were intimidated by his dignified aura. They showed a respectful expression and lowered their heads. However, they refused to back down and swore to get to the bottom of this matter. Nie Tianxian cupped his hands and said to the Huanglong Daoist, "Great Immortal. We are also willing to believe that this young Master Ji is our founder and that he can lead everyone to glory again. But how can we believe such an unimaginable thing? You are our teacher, so we naturally don't dare to offend you. However, we just want to know the truth and the reason. Otherwise, how can we be at ease?" You. Nie Tianxian. The Huanglong Daoist frowned and was about to reprimand him. At this moment, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted the Huanglong Daoist. "Huanglong, don't be angry. Let me handle this matter. It happened too suddenly, and it's too bizarre. It's normal for them to be unable to accept it for a while." After he finished speaking, he looked at the 5 elders with a dignified gaze and asked in a calm tone, "Everyone, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has fallen to such a state today and is in imminent danger. For the 5 of you to stay and fight alongside Huanglong until now, it can be seen that you are loyal and devoted to our sect. Since that's the case, I won't hide it from you. Just as Huanglong said, I've reincarnated, so my strength is still gradually recovering. This kind of thing that only exists in myths and legends is unattainable to you, but it's nothing to me. If you want to verify my identity, it's actually very simple. All you need to do is ask about something that only Kenshin knows about, and you'll be able to answer the questions in your hearts." Upon hearing these words, Nie Tianxian and the 4 elders' expressions softened significantly. Nie Tianxian pondered for a moment before saying, "Young Master Ji, there's a history book in our sect that records everything from the founding of our sect to his ascension. I hope that young Master Ji will consider my next question carefully before answering." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly. Nie Tianxian's expression was solemn as he asked, "Young Master Ji, may I ask when our sect's founding ancestor first arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? How many people were with him at that time?" Ji Tianxing answered without hesitation, "It was 1,546 years ago. There were 4 people with him, including Huanglong." Nie Tianxian's expression did not change as he continued to ask, "When was our sect's dojo built? What's the name of the formation in the dojo? How many transformations are there? Also, there are 108 mountains within 100,000 miles of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. What kind of formation do they form?" Ji Tianxing did not hesitate at all as he said in a calm voice, 1,546 years ago, during the fall of the leaves, I came to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and decided to build a dojo here and establish a sect. In just 36 days, my 4 followers and I built 18 palaces and 36 courtyards. When it was snowing, I built the dojo on my own and laid down the heavenly dome formation that contained 99 transformations to suppress the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After that, I used the ability to change heaven and earth and moved the surrounding mountains. With the 108 mountains, I formed the Heavenly Dipper Star Formation and the Earth Fiend Spirit Praying Formation. In the spring of the next year, I challenged all the martial saints in the world. In the following 20 years, a total of 49 martial saints came to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains one after another and competed with me on the dojo." Ji Tianxing's tone was very firm and clear. It was as if he had personally experienced those scenes and it was very vivid. Huanglong Daoist was silent as his eyes were filled with memories. Ji Bai and Shohei were shocked as they looked at Ji Tianxing with complicated expressions. Their eyes were filled with worship. The expressions of the elders also changed. They looked at each other and secretly discussed. Every word that he said matches the records in the history books without the slightest discrepancy. I'm beginning to believe that he is the reincarnation of our ancestor. If that's not the case, it doesn't make sense. There really is such a miracle in the world. Our ancestor has reincarnated and returned. The heavens are really blessing our sect. The elders all believed Ji Tianqing's words. Nie Tianqian still did not express his opinion. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a firm gaze and continued, our ancestor's life story is widely spread throughout the Jianghu continent, and everyone knows about it. If someone is diligent enough, they can spend a lot of time and effort investigating the clues, and they can easily answer the questions. Thus, it's not enough for Sir Ji to just answer these questions. May I ask, in which year did our ancestor challenge the four ultimates martial saints? Ji Tianqing expressionlessly replied, it was in the summer of the 11th year after our sect was founded. Nie Tianqian asked again, in the 12th year, our ancestor defeated the Flame Spirit tribe's martial saint in 2 moves, and not long after, he defeated the Grand Spring Nation's holy emperor with a single sword strike. Is that correct? Wrong. Ji Tianqing said in a low voice, in the 12th year, only the Flame Spirit tribe's martial saint came to challenge us, and I defeated him in 1 move. I defeated the Grand Spring Nation's holy emperor in the autumn of the following year, and I did not even use my sword. Instead, I forced him to retreat with a single punch. When they heard this, the 4 elders' eyes lit up, and they were filled with joy and excitement. This is unbelievable. He actually answered such a tricky question correctly. These matters are extremely secretive, and only our sect's history books have detailed records of them. He really is our ancestor's reincarnation. However, Nie Tianqian was not done with his questioning, and he solemnly said, Sir Ji, you still need to answer the last and most important question. Before our ancestor ascended, he left behind the Astral Sword Manual. What kinds of techniques does it contain? Our sect is the holy land closest to the heavens, and it hides a huge secret. After our ancestor ascended, countless powers coveted our sect's shocking secret, and they all attacked and persecuted us. Sir Ji, may I ask where this shocking secret is hidden? Ji Tianqing coldly replied, the Astral Sword Manual has a total of 5 secret techniques. They are the Sword Manipulation Sutra, the 9 Swords of the Burial of Heaven, the Sky Dragon's 7 Steps, the Heavenly Spirit Body Refining Art, and the Myriad Sword Array. As for where this shocking secret is hidden, only the sect masters of each generation are qualified to know. Now, Huang Long is still the sect master of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Other than me, only he knows about it. At this point, he stared sharply at Nie Tianqian, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. He said in a cold voice, you're only an elder of our sect, and you're not qualified to know this question. You're deliberately questioning me with this secret. If you're not stupid, then you're evil. As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful and invisible pressure burst out from his body, and it pressed down on Nie Tianqian like a mountain. Nie Tianqian's expression changed immediately, and a look of fear and trepidation appeared on his face. He quickly knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. Chapter 1876. An invisible divine power suppressed Nie Tianqian. He prostrated himself on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. The invisible pressure made him panic, as if he felt that death was approaching. His body became cold and stiff. The 4 elders standing behind him were also pale with fright. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. Unfilial disciple welcomes the return of the Grand Master. The 5 elders knelt down, and Ji Bai and Shohei also hurriedly knelt down. That domineering and unparalleled divine power filled the hall, making the 2 of them anxious and afraid to breathe. Only Huanglong Daoist was still standing. His back was straight, his face was red, and his eyes were full of pride. He stared at Ji Tianqing, as if he was looking at his master Kenshin. His thoughts also returned to more than 1,500 years ago. Ji Tianqing sat on the bronze throne and looked down at Nie Tianqian and the others. Although the 5 elders believed him and accepted his identity, this was not the end. However, this was not the end. It was a new beginning. He stretched out his left hand, and the longevity vine on the lampstand next to the throne flew up and landed in his palm. He held the longevity vine in his hand and pointed at Nie Tianchen, who was lying on the ground, and said in a dignified tone, Nie Tianchen, although I have just returned today and don't know the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I still don't know the situation. However, what you have done today has crossed the line again and again, and even touched the taboo of our sect. Since this is your first offense, I will be lenient. I hope you will remember it in your heart. After saying that, he waved his left hand, and the longevity vine turned into a ray of green light and flew into Huang Long Daoist's hand. Huang Long, carry out 20 whippings. Huang Long Daoist held the longevity vine with both hands and was stunned. Master, are you really going to let me carry out the punishment? Aren't you going to do it yourself as a warning to others? Huang Long Daoist knew that his master was reincarnated as Ji Tianqing. A young man in his 20s was too young. His master had just returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the elders were not convinced. His master could use this opportunity to show his power and intimidate the elders. However, he did not expect that his master would not do it and let him carry out the punishment. Thinking of this, he could not help but think, Master's strength is too weak now, and he is afraid that he will show his cowardice. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, Nie Tianchen is your disciple, of course, you should discipline him, he is not qualified for me to carry out the punishment. Huang Long hurriedly nodded his head to express his understanding. He said solemnly, I understand. With these words, he held the longevity vine with both hands and walked to Nie Tianchen's side. Suppressed by the invisible divine might, Nie Tianchen was still sprawled on the ground, unable to move. Of Daoist. Master, please have mercy and spare this disciple this time. Although his seniority was low, he was an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years. He was also the great elder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. His status was second only to Huang Long Daoist. Now that the elders and Ji Bai Shohei were present, he had to lie on the ground and be whipped. How humiliating was that? When he thought of being whipped in public, he was so ashamed that his face turned red like fire. Huang Long Daoist did not dare to show mercy. He shouted with a dignified face, Nie Tianchen, don't blame me for not forgiving you. You are too foolish. You ignored my advice and repeatedly offended the patriarch. You must be punished. If I am biased, I will also be whipped. You can't disobey the teachings of the ancestors and forget the rules of the sect. I hope you will learn your lesson. After that, Huang Long Daoist held the longevity vine and whipped Nie Tianchen's buttocks. Slap! A crisp explosion resounded in the hall. Nie Tianchen's purple robe was torn to shreds. Blood splattered from his buttocks. He raised his head and screamed in pain. Before he could finish his screams, the second whip lashed out. Slap! Another crisp sound rang out. Nie Tianchen's flesh was torn open. His body convulsed, and his back was soaked in cold sweat. The great elder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, an 8th-level crossing tribulation martial lord, a white-haired old man, was being whipped in public. How humiliating was that? Not only was Nie Tianchen in pain, but he was also humiliated. He wanted to kill himself. Unfortunately, he was being punished in the hall by Huang Long Daoist. No matter how much pain and humiliation he felt, he could only grit his teeth and endure it. He did not dare to scream anymore. Instead, he kept groaning in pain. The 4 elders were the closest to Nie Tianchen. Seeing Nie Tianchen being tortured with their own eyes, their faces turned ghastly pale, and they fell silent out of fear. Before long, the 20 whips were over. The invisible divine might that was suppressing Nie Tianchen had dissipated. However, he had lost consciousness from the pain. He lay on the ground like a clay figurine, unable to get up. His back and buttocks were already badly mutilated. It was a horrible sight. The pain that went deep into his bones was etched in his heart. He did not want to experience it again in his life. However, miraculously, the messy wounds on his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Huanglong Daoist held the longevity vine with both hands and walked to the bottom of the dais respectfully. He reported, "Master, I've finished the punishment." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, the longevity vine flew back to the lampstand and landed on the ground. "All right, you may all rise." As soon as he said those words, the murderous aura in the hall was swept away. Everyone felt relieved. They heaved a sigh of relief and quickly stood up. Mia Tianchen was in the most pain. He struggled to stand up and grimaced in pain. However, he did not dare to make a sound. Ji Tianqing looked at the Huanglong Daoist and asked, "When I returned to the mountain just now, I saw that the spiritual qi at the foot of the mountain was gone. The river had dried up, and the mountain peak was also in decline. Even the disciples were not as prosperous as they used to be. There were only 100 or 200 of them left. Huanglong, tell me, what has happened in the past 1,000 years?" At the mention of these things, the Huanglong Daoist's face was full of self-blame. He quickly bowed and said, "I was incompetent. I failed to protect Master's orthodoxy and let the Tianzhu mountain wither. Since Master ascended, too many changes and disasters have happened in the past 1,000 years. Our sect was on the verge of destruction 9 times. The twists and turns and the hardships we went through could not be finished even if I talked for 3 days and 3 nights. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Then make it short. Just report the results." The Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and said, "Since Master left, our sect has been known as the #1 sect in the world. A tall tree attracts the wind. We have been persecuted and suppressed by countless forces and countries. Chapter 1877. The Huanglong Daoist narrated his experiences over the past 1,000 years in a sorrowful and indignant tone. Ji Tianqing reclined on the bronze throne, quietly listening to the conversation. However, no one knew that he had been secretly observing Mia Tianchen from the corner of his eyes, observing his reaction. However, Mia Tianchen's expression was calm, and his behavior was very normal. The Huanglong Daoist spoke for a while and roughly described the 9 crises that had almost destroyed the sect. "Master, after those 9 calamities, our sect has already declined and withered away, dispirited and listless. Most of the 3,000 disciples back then had died in battle or quietly fled the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In recent years, the sect has only about 230 people left. Among them, there are more than 50 odd workers and 160 disciples." Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a low voice, "The number of disciples in the sect is so small that it can't even compare to ordinary second-rate sections. By the way, in the past 1,000 years, you have been fighting with various forces. Have you investigated their backgrounds?" The Huanglong Daoist thought for a while and replied, "In the past 1,000 years, there have been thousands of forces that have openly and secretly attacked the sect. The disciples divided those forces into 3 classes. The lowest class was the weakest. They were usually instigated by others or blinded by greed. These forces are not a concern. They are all a motley crew. I can't even remember their origins and names. The stronger first-rate forces are all empires or top sections. They all have martial saints and a large number of tribulation-passing experts. They are either defeated by the forces of your martial saints or want to occupy the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and snatch the secret manuals of martial arts. These forces are very difficult to deal with. If we are not careful, we will be heavily injured and our vitality will be greatly damaged. The truly terrifying ones are the 2 super forces hidden in the dark. One of them is the ghost clan of the North Underworld Mountain. The other force is a powerful divine nation." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. It is understandable that the demon clan of the North Underworld Mountain wants to attack the sect. 1,000 years ago, I helped the Luoshui martial god to kill his way into the North Underworld Mountain. He destroyed 96 tribes and slaughtered millions of demons. 4 great devil saints besieged me, and 3 of them were heavily injured by me. They hate me to the core. Naturally, they will take revenge on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains after I ascend. But who is the hidden force of the divine nation that you mentioned? Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment and muttered to himself, the Luo River God nation has the closest relationship with me, and they don't even have time to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, let alone deal with it. As for the Taihao divine kingdom, martial god Taihao owes me a favor and treats me with great respect. He was not a sinister and despicable person, so it was impossible for him to deal with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Now that I think about it, only martial god Tianju had a cold and arrogant attitude, and had some animosity with me. Huanglong Daoist nodded and said, that's right. The situation is just as Master said. The disciples had clashed with that force countless times and investigated for over 100 years. Finally, they found evidence that could be used against them and their identities. It was the people from the Heaven Extinction God nation. Furthermore, they might have been ordered by martial god Tianju. As for the Luo River God nation, they have secretly helped us in the past 1,000 years and resolved many dangers and difficulties. If not for the Luo River God nation's secret help, I'm afraid our sect would not have survived until today. Ji Tianqing listened calmly and thought to himself, I have not repaid the favor I owed Luo River. Now that I owe even more, I can't repay it. He looked at the Huanglong Daoist with a burning gaze and asked in a solemn tone, other than the Heaven Extinction God nation and the North Underworld Mountain, which other forces are persecuting our sect? The 2 arrays that I set up back then have already been destroyed, causing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to lack spiritual qi. To be able to see through the 108 mountain arrays, one has to be at least a martial sage. And to be able to destroy the 2 arrays, one has to be a martial god. Huanglong Daoist hesitated for a moment before replying angrily, with the 2 strong enemies, the Heaven Extinction God nation and the North Underworld Mountain, our sect is already in imminent danger. But in our current situation, not only do we have external troubles, we also have internal troubles. Back then, when Master was in charge of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, all the sects in the world came to pay their respects and countless geniuses were honored to join our sect. Around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, within 100 million mile radius, all the villages, towns, cities and sects have all submitted to our sect. But now, out of the 9 sects and 18 factions that submitted to us, more than half of them have become disloyal. Out of the 300 cities, tens of thousands of villages and tribes that submitted to us, more than half of them have left our sect's jurisdiction. They have either established their own sects or submitted to other sects. After hearing these words, Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a cold smile. He, as expected. Back then, when our sect was strong and powerful, hundreds of cities submitted to us for protection. The 9 sects and 18 factions also submitted to us and regarded themselves as our subjects. Now that our sect has declined, the various forces have also rebelled. No wonder the 2 arrays were destroyed and the spiritual qi of heavens and earth dried up. After muttering a few words to himself, he continued, Huanglong, what other bad news do you have? Tell me all at once. Huanglong Daoist looked at him deeply, his heart filled with self-blame and shame. Obviously, Ji Tianqing was already mentally prepared and prepared for the worst. Thus, Huanglong Daoist continued to report the news. A few months ago, a large number of ghost clan powerhouses from the North Underworld Mountain used crafty schemes and sneaked into our sect to start a massacre. In that battle, the disciples and a few elders were injured. The 6th and 7th elders also died in battle. There were also a few deacons, more than 50 disciples, and more than 30 guards who were all killed by the ghost clan powerhouses. Our sect originally had more than 200 people, but only a little more than 180 people are left. Now that our sect's defense is empty, we are in imminent danger. Unfortunately, when the 9 sects and 18 factions heard the news, they took the opportunity to rebel. Only the 2 sects and the 4 factions still remember their old friendship and belong to our sect in name, but they will not lend a hand. The other 7 sects and 14 factions are divided into 2 groups. They are planning to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, seize the training grounds, and seize Master's inheritance. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's aura became even colder, and his eyes were filled with dense killing intent. They are really treacherous and despicable people who forget their ancestors. Back then, they took the initiative to climb the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and came to beg me to take them under the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I made an agreement with the leaders of the 9 sects and 18 factions to protect them and teach them the profoundness of martial arts. Now, they want to join forces to destroy the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and seize my martial arts inheritance. Huang Long, what are the sects in those two groups? Huang Long Daoist said with resentment. In the east, the Water Mirror sect, the Battle Dragon sect, and the Seeking Heaven sect colluded and gathered the 6 great sects with the Battle Dragon sect as the leader. Chapter 1878. 1,000 years ago, before the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was established, the situation within 100 million miles was very chaotic. This area was located between the North Underworld Mountain, the Luo Shui Kingdom, and the ruins of God. It could be said to be a dangerous place. However, this area was very vast and had a radius of 100 million miles. There were more than 20 sects, hundreds of cities, and tens of thousands of villages and villages. Between the sects and cities, because of various grievances and conflicts of interest, there had always been endless killing. It was only until the Kenshin took over the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and established the sect that the chaos that had lasted for thousands of years ended. At that time, the 9 sects and 18 schools, as well as the hundreds of cities, were all frightened by the might of the Kenshin and fought to submit to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains in order to obtain protection and help. The Kenshin was obsessed with martial arts and had no intention of fighting for hegemony, so he accepted the 9 sects, 18 schools, and many cities. He even picked out more than 20 spiritual veins from the 108 mountain peaks around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and gave them to the 9 sects and 18 schools to be their mountain gates. In his opinion, as long as the Pillar of Heaven's mountains existed, it would be a good deed to maintain peace within 100 million miles. However, he never expected that 1,000 years later, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would wither to this extent, and most of the 9 sects and 18 schools would rebel. When this matter was brought up, everyone was filled with indignation and hatred towards the 9 sects and 18 schools' actions. Compared to the hostility and persecution of the various forces, the betrayal of the former officials was more hateful. The main hall fell into silence, and the atmosphere was rather oppressive. Ji Tianqing finally understood why the Huanglong Daoists sent him a letter to return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the eyes of the Huanglong Daoist, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would not be able to escape this calamity. When the 9 sects and 18 schools attacked, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would definitely fall, and countless disciples would be killed. The lucky survivors would all escape from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the former number 1 sect would disappear. Therefore, before the sect was destroyed, the Huanglong Daoist had to summon the successor of the Kenshin and make arrangements for his death. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing said in a firm and dignified tone, after more than 1,000 years of suffering and wind and rain, it is not easy for everyone to hold on until today. Although the situation is perilous, everyone should not be pessimistic. As the overseer of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I will definitely punish the evildoers, purge the evildoers, and restore the prestige of the sect. Huanglong Daoist hurriedly nodded and said with a heavy heart, Master, don't worry. Huanglong swears to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains with my life. I swear to live and die with the sect. Nia Tianchen and the other 4 elders also expressed their determination in serious tones. Grand Master, please rest assured. We swear to live and die with the sect. Ji Tianqing nodded with satisfaction and warned, today's matter must be kept strictly confidential. Especially my identity, you must not reveal it. From now on, in front of outsiders, I am a disciple of Kenshin. Huanglong Daoist and the other elders understood that his identity must be kept a secret. If the news were to leak out and outsiders knew that he was Kenshin's reincarnation, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. At that time, it would definitely bring disaster to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even he might be killed. After the meeting ended, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and dismissed the other elders. He brought Ji Bai and Shohei out of the main hall and entered the Pillar of Heaven's palace behind the main hall. The Pillar of Heaven's palace in the backyard was the place where he lived and cultivated in the past. After thousands of years, when he entered the Pillar of Heaven's palace, everything was still the same. The layout of the pavilions and corridors had not changed at all. Only the flowers and plants in the courtyard had been changed over and over again. Usually, the disciples and odd job workers of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would come to clean the place once every few days. The windows in the palace were clean and the floor and pillars were spotless. Ji Tianqing walked through the corridors and entered the depths of the palace. He came to a dark brown secret room. The door of this secret room was 10 feet high and 3 feet wide. The two bronze doors were full of majestic vicissitudes of life and exuded a heavy and majestic aura. The left door was carved with a sacred beast, water qilin, and the right door was carved with a divine bird, fire phoenix. The two-word sword pavilion were carved on the rock wall above the door. This was the secret room where Kenshin went into seclusion. Ever since Kenshin left that year, this secret room had been permanently sealed and no one had opened it again. Ji Tianqing stood in front of the door of the secret room. His eyes stared at the qilin and phoenix patterns. He slowly reached out his palms and pressed them on the bronze door knocker. Majestic and mighty golden mana surged out from his palms and poured into the bronze door. Suddenly, the dark green bronze door lit up with thousands of golden lines and emitted a dazzling golden light. The water qilin and fire phoenix patterns also seemed to come alive. They raised their heads and shouted, spreading their wings and emitting a divine domineering aura that looked down on the world. Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai and Shohei stood behind Ji Tianqing. They felt the ancient and vast domineering aura. Their hearts surged and they felt a strong sense of reverence. After 10 breaths, the two bronze doors slowly opened, emitting a dull creaking sound. Wisps of dust fell from the lintel and door frame. Under the golden light, they danced like thousands of golden light spots. Ji Tianqing stepped into the secret room first. Huanglong Daoist followed closely behind. Ji Bai and Shohei stood guard outside the door. The secret room was pitch black. When Ji Tianqing took 7 steps, the surrounding walls and the dome above suddenly lit up with gemstone lamps. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Hundreds of bright lamps bloomed with colorful spiritual light, immediately illuminating the secret room as if it was daytime. The secret room had a radius of 100 feet. The floor was square and the dome was round. It was in accordance with the profound meaning of the circle of heaven and earth. The floor was paved with light green spiritual jade. It was engraved with mysterious and complex array patterns, as mysterious as the meridians of the human body. 36,000 gemstones were inlaid on the dome. They shone with cold silver light, forming a star chart. Under the north wall of the secret room, there was a spacious purple jade throne. On the wall behind the throne, there were hundreds of lines of seal script, recording several swordsmanship heart sutras. There was also a secret door on the wall, leading to the secret room on the next floor. Ji Tianqing walked to the purple jade throne, waved his hand to wipe away the fine dust, and sat down. Huanglong Daoist stood respectfully, waiting for Ji Tianqing's orders. He knew very well that Ji Tianqing did not bring him here just to reminisce about the old days. Sure enough, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a golden light, closing the door of the secret room. Only the two of them were left in the secret room, falling into silence. Ji Tianqing said, "Now that our sect is facing internal and external troubles, we must use thunderous means to contain them. Great Elder Nye Tianqian, have you investigated carefully? Is this person reliable?" Huanglong Daoist said with a serious face, "I understand what you mean, Master. In the past, I also suspected that there was a mole in our sect who cooperated with the enemy forces. However, I have secretly investigated for more than 30 years and only found one mole, a deacon of our sect. As for Nye Tianqian, he is my eldest disciple. He has been following me for more than 300 years. So far, I have not found anything unusual." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, "What if he is a mole carefully cultivated by the heaven and divine nation and deliberately planted by them?" In order to solve the mystery of ascension, it is possible for him to hide for hundreds of years. Chapter 1879. Since ancient times, the world had been isolated, and no one had been able to ascend. Countless peerless martial gods had been trapped in the Jianghu continent, and they could only live with regret for the rest of their lives. More than 1,000 years ago, Kenshin had appeared out of nowhere and swept across the continent with his most dazzling and invincible form, ascending to the higher realms. When he became the first person to ascend in 30,000 years, all the powerhouses on the Jianghu continent believed that Jianghu Mountain hid the mystery of ascension. As long as they could attack Jianghu Mountain and obtain the mystery of ascension, they would be able to break the legend of the world's isolation and ascend to the higher realms like Kenshin. Not only were the martial gods tempted, but many of the martial saints on the continent were also eager to obtain the mystery of ascension. This was why Jianghu Mountain had been besieged by various powers, and it had declined to its current state. However, only Huanglong Daoist knew that there was no such mystery of ascension at Jianghu Mountain. Currently, there were only a few precious treasures on Jianghu Mountain. Kenshin had left behind the Astral Sword Manual, the Firmament Array, the Divine Astral Furnace, and the Longevity Vine. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and said to Ji Tianqing, "Master, please do not worry. I will double my vigilance and secretly monitor Nie Tianqin's movements." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. "This is only my guess. I cannot confirm whether or not he is a spy from the Heaven and Divine Nation. However, I have already set up a trap, and the answer will be revealed soon." "What trap?" Huanglong Daoist asked curiously. A meaningful smile appeared on Ji Tianqing's face as he explained, "Currently, only a few people know about my identity. Furthermore, I intentionally ordered everyone to keep it a secret. However, this news is too shocking, and it can even cause a huge commotion on the Jianghu continent. It can even cause chaos in the three divine nations and Dark North Mountain. If Nie Tianqin is a spy from the Heaven and Divine Nation, then he would rather expose his identity and spread this news." Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood, and his eyes lit up. "That's right. If he is a spy, then his goal is to obtain the mystery of ascension. Now that you have reincarnated and returned, the Heaven Extinction God Nation only needs to capture you to obtain the mystery of ascension. Master, if that's really the case, then aren't you in an extremely dangerous situation?" Huanglong's expression changed, and a worried look appeared on his face. "No. I'll capture Nie Tianqin now and imprison him. Regardless of whether he is a spy or not, we would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. We can't let Master take the risk." With that, he turned to leave. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said sternly, "Wait." For the time being, they didn't want to make a move on Nie Tianqin. They just needed to keep an eye on him so that they wouldn't alert him. Moreover, I have already made plans and arrangements. If he's really a spy, it's within my expectations that he would announce my identity." Huanglong Daoist was even more puzzled. He asked, "But Master, once your identity is exposed, it will bring endless danger and trouble." Ji Tianqing shook his head gently and said, "The pillar of Heaven's mountains has already withered to such a state. We must use thunderous means to save it. It's time to rise from the ashes. As long as we stir up the storm, the big fish under the water will emerge. And our pillar of Heaven's mountains will be the small boat fighting the storm." Huanglong Daoist vaguely understood his meaning. After a moment of silence, he nodded solemnly and said, "Disciple will follow Master's orders." Ji Tianqing ordered again, "There's no time to lose. Let's start executing the plan now. Before the 7 sects and 14 forces send out the attack, we must complete the deployment. Huanglong, you personally lead a few elders to check the protective array. I will personally activate the firmament array. In addition, I have brought a large number of healing pills and cultivation resources. Later, you will distribute them to the disciples and ask them to heal as soon as possible. Also, the most important thing is to send a message to the 2 sects and 4 forces in your name. Ask them to come to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for a meeting." Huanglong Daoist was startled for a moment and said with some hesitation, "Master, You want to summon the people of the 2 sects and 4 forces? Right now, they are still under the pillar of heaven's mountains in name and have not rebelled with the other sections. This is already the most they can do. Even if I send a message to summon them for a meeting, they will definitely not dare to come. They will definitely find all kinds of excuses to evade. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, if that's the case, then I will personally go and meet the people of those sections. Huanglong Daoist could not help but ask, Master, why are you going to meet them at this time? Of course, to help them stabilize the morale of their troops and let them swear loyalty to the pillar of heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation. This. Huanglong Daoist frowned with a strange expression. He thought to himself, the situation has already developed to this point. Zhanlong Martial Saint and Ni Wuya are so aggressive. How can the 2 sects and 4 forces still be loyal to us? He almost saw no hope and was somewhat pessimistic. Master has been away for more than 1,000 years and does not understand the current situation. He is destined to return empty-handed, sigh. Huanglong Daoist sighed in his heart, but he did not dare to go against Ji Tianqing's will and could only nod in agreement. Since Master wants to inspect the situation of the 2 sects and 4 forces, of course, I will accompany you. Tomorrow morning, I will take you there. Then, Huanglong Daoist left the secret room and went to gather the elders and deacons to issue a series of orders. Ji Tianqing also left the throne and walked to the stone wall behind it. He waved his hand and made a series of hand seals to open the secret door on the wall. Creak, creak, creak. After the secret door opened, a dark passage appeared. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a golden light into the passage. The passage suddenly lit up with bright lights and extended downwards. Ji Tianqing stepped into the passage and fell downwards. His figure was drowned by the dazzling lights. The passage was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. It extended downwards and was at least 10,000 feet high. When he occupied the pillar of heaven's mountains, he opened up this passage in the secret room. It ran through the entire pillar of heaven's mountains and extended deep underground. No one knew that under the pillar of heaven's mountains, there was an unprecedented divine formation called the stellar divine furnace. The 108 mountains within a radius of 100,000 miles formed the Big Dipper Starnet Array and the Earth Fiend Spirit Praying Array. When these 2 super arrays were activated, they would gather endless divine power of heaven and earth and pour it into the pillar of heaven's mountains. The heavenly dome array of the pillar of heaven's mountains would gather the power of the stars and pour it into the stellar divine furnace together with the divine power of heaven and earth. As long as these 3 arrays did not stop operating, the stellar divine furnace would never be extinguished. Back then, Kenshin cultivated in the stellar divine furnace to temper his body and create the stellar body refinement art. Everyone thought that Kenshin was cultivating in seclusion in the secret room, but he was actually cultivating in the stellar divine furnace. The stellar divine furnace had a powerful and miraculous effect. It was not only beneficial to martial sages but also to martial gods. Chapter 1880. Swoosh. Ji Tianqing passed through a hazy light and landed at the bottom of the tunnel. He was already 1,000 feet deep underground. The surroundings were extremely spacious, like a cave with a radius of 100 miles. Of course, this cave was still inside the pillar of heaven's mountains. In the dark sky, there were specks of fire floating in the faint silver light, like moonlight. Ji Tianqing stood in mid-air and looked down at the open space below him. He saw that the open space within a radius of 100 miles was densely covered with silver veins, as dense as a fishing net. Every meridian was an array pattern that extended in all directions, all the way to the edge of the empty space. In the middle of the open space, there was a tall platform that looked like a torch. In the huge torch, there was a silver flame that was more than 10 feet tall, very conspicuous in the darkness. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes dimmed. He muttered to himself, back then, the stellar divine cauldron was operating at full power, and the stellar divine fire filled the entire cauldron. Now, there is only a weak flame left. It seems that the 2 heaven-earth divine arrays have been completely destroyed. As he spoke, he stepped across the sky and landed on the tall torch. The star divine fire, which was more than 3 meters tall, immediately enveloped his body and enveloped him. His clothes and hair were instantly burned to ashes. His strong and perfect body was immediately exposed to be burned and refined by the stellar divine fire. His skin and flesh were sparkling and translucent like spirit jade, and they were covered in a layer of hazy golden light. Before this, his body had been refined by the heavenly thunder and the stellar divine fire. Previously, he had also used the tribulations of wind and fire to refine his body, so his body had already reached an extremely powerful level. Even so, under the refinement of the stellar divine fire, his body was still distorted and deformed, constantly cracking and being reborn. Fortunately, the stellar divine fire is 100 times weaker, so I can withstand it with my current strength. If it was like back then, even a martial sage would be burned to ashes, and I wouldn't be able to refine my body. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself and started to use the stellar body refining art, absorbing the stellar divine fire to refine his body. As time went by, his physical body was refined and strengthened. His qi was increasing exponentially as well. If a martial artist's physical body was compared to a water bucket, then his transcendence energy and spiritual energy would be water. The bigger the bucket, the more water it could hold. The bodies of ordinary tribulation stage powerhouses were like buckets. Ji Tianqing's physical body had been strengthened to the peak of the tribulation stage. It was like a big water tank that could hold 20 times more water. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. It was the morning of the second day. After a night of tempering, Ji Tianqing's physical body had reached the peak of the cross-calamity realm and he was now a half-step to martial sage. His skin had recovered completely. It was sparkling and translucent like jade. Not only was it shining with a faint golden light, it was also mixed with a trace of silver starlight. Even his long hair had regrown and hung loosely behind his head. As for his dermic powers and spiritual energy, they had also increased by about 5 times. He stopped cultivating and stepped away from the high platform. Shwa! With a flash of light in his palm, a set of clothes flew out from the space ring and covered his body. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his previous appearance, but his aura was even stronger. The third heavenly tribulation is probably coming soon. A playful smile appeared on his face as he flew into the sky and flew toward the exit. After 100 breaths, he walked out of the secret chamber. Ji Bai and Shohei, who had been guarding the door of the secret chamber, hurriedly greeted him. Greetings, Grand Master. Grand Master, the great immortal is waiting for you outside the hall. Ji Tianqing nodded and led the two of them out of the Pillar of Heaven Palace. Outside the meeting hall, the Huanglong Daoist in an apricot yellow robe was waiting patiently. Seeing Ji Tianqing come out, he hurriedly greeted him. Greetings, Master. Ji Tianqing raised his hand to indicate that he was excused and looked around. He saw that many disciples were busy in the palaces and courtyards around the training hall. Some were cleaning the palaces and courtyards, while others were inspecting and repairing the formation. Let's go. Ji Tianqing brought Huang Long, Ji Bai, and Shohei to the center of the training hall. The sword steel in the middle of the training hall was still surrounded by spiritual energy, faintly emitting a majestic aura that looked down on the world. Ji Tianqing came near the sword steel and asked with his mind, Burial of Heaven, aren't you going out with me to take a look? The voice of Burial of Heaven sounded in his mind and replied, No need, I will stay in the sword steel to recuperate. It will be faster to recover my vitality, and at the same time, I can guard the Pillar of Heaven mountain. That's good too. Ji Tianqing did not say anything else and waved his hand to summon the black dragon. Ong! With a dragon roar that shook the clouds, a black dragon that was 10,000 feet long appeared out of thin air. Huang Long's eyes widened as he exclaimed in disbelief, Dragon! Divine Dragon! Master! Could it be that junior brother White Dragon has returned? As he was too shocked, he did not see the black dragon's appearance clearly. After he exclaimed, he realized that something was wrong and muttered with a strange expression, That's not right. Isn't junior brother White Dragon white? Why did he turn black after reincarnation? Ji Tianqing glanced at him with a strange expression. He held back his laughter and explained, "This is not White Dragon, this is Master's new companion, Black Dragon." Oh. Huang Long came to a realization and smiled embarrassedly. Disciple forgot himself. "Master, please don't blame me." Ji Tianqing also revealed a smile and comforted, "But don't worry, maybe in a few years, you will be able to see little White Dragon again." Ah. Really? Huang Long Daoist was shocked and asked, "But according to the rumors on the continent, junior brother White Dragon has already died in battle." Ji Tianqing only smiled and did not explain further. Then, Black Dragon carried everyone into the sky and rushed to the east as fast as lightning. About 4 hours later, Black Dragon flew more than 30,000 miles. It stopped in the sky above a giant mountain that was 30,000 feet high. This giant mountain covered an area of 300 miles. The bottom of the mountain was surrounded by green mountains and rivers. The mountain walls were steep and half of the mountain was covered by clouds. On the top of the mountain, there was an open space with a radius of 100 miles. More than 10 palaces and houses were built on it, which could accommodate thousands of people and allow them to cultivate. Obviously, this giant mountain was one of the 108 mountain peaks. It was also a place with a spiritual vein. When the 9 sects and 18 factions came to pledge their allegiance, Kenshin gave this mountain peak to Gue Yuan sect. Gue Yuan sect was in decline at that time and was about to become a second-rate sect. It was with the protection of Tianzhu Mountain that Gue Yuan sect regained its vitality and continued to exist until today. Huang Long Daoist stood beside Ji Tianqing and pointed to the palace at the top of the mountain. He introduced, "Master, Gue Yuan sect leader Zhao Guiyuan has already given up his position. He has been promoted to Grand Elder and has been cultivating in seclusion all year round, wanting to break through to the martial saint realm." Chapter 1881. Since Zhao Guiyuan is still alive, then things will be easier. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows as a light flashed across his eyes. Under his command, the Black Dragon descended from the sky towards the peak of the mountain. When it was 100 feet away from the peak of the mountain protection array of the Gue Yuan sect was activated and a thick 5-colored light shield lit up. The Black Dragon crashed into the 5-colored light shield and made a loud sound. Layers of ripples appeared on the half-meter thick light barrier, but it did not break. The Huanglong Daoist took a step forward and was about to shout out his identity and purpose. However, Ji Tianqing waved his hand to stop him. His eyes turned into 2 golden flames as he activated his God's Eye technique and stared at the 5-colored light shield in front of him. Suddenly, the scene in front of him changed. The 5-colored light shield turned into a dense array. He. It's been 1,000 years, Zhao Guiyuan really did not improve. This mountain protection array is still the 10 directions origin array that I set up back then. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing raised his palms and shot out rays of spiritual light into the 5-colored light shield. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, a door opened in the 5-colored light shield. The Black Dragon carried everyone through the 5-colored light door and entered the Gue Yuan sect. The layout of the Gue Yuan sect was different from the circular layout of the Tianzhu Mountain. Behind the mountain gate was a square with a radius of 10,000 feet. The Gue Yuan Hall was to the north of the square. Further back, there were more than 10 palaces and mansions that were distributed in a triangular shape. When the Black Dragon arrived at the peak of the Gue Yuan Mountain, it was discovered by a group of patrolling guards. This was the first time the group of guards saw the Dragon God. They were all shocked and dumbfounded. When the Black Dragon landed on the square, the group of guards woke up from their daze and rushed over to stop it. "Who are you? How dare you trespass on our mountain gate? How should you be punished?" 9 guards rushed to the middle of the square and surrounded the Black Dragon with swords and knives in their hands. However, the Huanglong Daoist took a step forward and shouted with a dignified expression, "The Huanglong Daoist from Tianzhu Mountain has come to visit. Sect leader Qin, please come out to meet us." The faces of the 9 guards changed. After recognizing the Huanglong Daoist, they hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Great Immortal Yellow Dragon. To think that the Great Immortal has come to visit. We have offended the Great Immortal, please forgive us. Great Immortal, please wait for a moment. I will go and report the news. The two quick-witted guards quickly left the plaza and went to Gue Yuan Palace to report the news. Not long after, a burly middle-aged man in a golden robe walked out of the hall. This person looked to be in his 40s. His face was resolute, and he exuded the dignity of a sect master. Behind him were two purple-robed elders. The middle-aged man came to the square and saw the black dragon at a glance. He immediately stopped in his tracks and widened his eyes in shock. Divine dragon? How did the yellow dragon great deity get a black dragon as a mount? Could it be that the Jianghu mountain is in a critical situation and the yellow dragon great deity has invited strong reinforcements? After being stunned for a moment, he suppressed the shock in his heart and went forward with the two elders. Junior Qin Shan greets the yellow dragon great deity. May I know why the great immortal has suddenly come to our sect? Qin Shan and the two elders bowed respectfully to Li Mu. The Huanglong Daoist said with a dignified expression, "This is not the place to talk." Qin Shan immediately understood. He extended his hand and made a "please" gesture, leading everyone to Gue Yuan Palace. Ji Tianqing kept the black dragon and brought the Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai, Shohei, into the dignified and bright meeting hall. After entering the hall, everyone took their seats. Qin Shan sat on the sect leader's throne. Ji Tianqing sat on the left side of the seat of honor. The Huanglong Daoist sat beside him. Ji Bai and Shohei stood solemnly behind Ji Tianqing. They did not speak, like two statues. Qin Shan observed and saw that the Huanglong Daoist was very respectful to Ji Tianqing. He could not help but feel puzzled. With the yellow dragon great deity's strength and status, why is he so respectful to this person? This should not be. Could it be that this person is the master of the black dragon, the strong reinforcements invited by Jianghu mountain? Thinking of this, Qin Shan secretly sized up Ji Tianqing. He felt that something was not right. At this time, the Huanglong Daoist opened his mouth and said, "Qin Shan, I have something important to discuss with you today. I would like to ask these two elders to leave for now." Qin Shan's expression suddenly froze. He smiled and said, "Great deity must be joking. These two elders are the pillars of our sect. They are definitely trustworthy people. If the great deity has any instructions, please tell them directly." He already knew that Jianghu mountain was in imminent danger. Soon, it would be destroyed by the major sections. The yellow dragon great deity's sudden visit to Gue Yuan sect was definitely not a good thing. He was most likely here to ask for help. Therefore, he could only remain polite on the surface. If they were to talk about serious matters, he would definitely not listen to them. The Huanglong Daoist frowned unhappily. He temporarily suppressed his anger and turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing, who was beside him. He wanted to ask for Ji Tianqing's opinion with his eyes. Ji Tianqing raised his hands slightly and knocked on the armrest of his chair with his knuckles. The Huanglong Daoist immediately understood. He shot out two spiritual shock waves and attacked the two purple-robed elders. Bang bang. Two muffled sounds were heard from the spiritual shock waves. The two purple-robed elders immediately fell into a coma and lost their consciousness. Plop plop, the two of them fell down at the same time. They lay in the main hall and no longer made a sound. Qin Shan's expression suddenly changed. He stood up and stared angrily at the Huanglong Daoist. "Huang Dragon Great Deity, what are you doing?" The Huanglong Daoist ignored him. He waved his hand and used a secret technique. He created a protective shield with a radius of 1,000 feet and covered the entire meeting hall. All the sounds and movements in the main hall would not be heard outside. Ji Tianqing then raised his eyelids and looked coldly at Qin Shan. He said sternly, "What I am about to say is related to the survival of Gue Yuan sect. The fewer people who know about it, the better. Years ago, Gui Yuan's sect was almost destroyed. If not for Jianghu Mountain's protection and rescue, it would have been destroyed. When Zhao Guiyuan knelt in front of me and kowtowed to me, he swore that he would always be loyal to Jianghu Mountain. I did not expect that after more than 1,000 years, when Jianghu Mountain was in danger, Gui Yuan's sect would be so ungrateful. Since this is the case, I have no choice but to take back my righteousness personally. Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent. His tone was calm, but he was not angry. Qin Shan was instantly stunned. He stared at Ling Yun with a face full of shock and confusion. You? Who are you? How dare you call the great elder of our sect by his name? Hearing this, the Huanglong Daoist laughed and said with disdain, Qin Shan, my teacher called Zhao Guiyuan by his name. Back then, when Zhao Guiyuan knelt in front of my teacher, he did not even have the right to clean his shoes. What? Qin Shan's eyes widened again. He was shocked and angry. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said with a face full of disdain, with your determination and wisdom, how can you be in charge of Gui Yuan sect? I think Gui Yuan sect is not far from being destroyed. My time is limited. I don't want to waste my breath on a junior like you. Go and ask Zhao Guiyuan to come out. Chapter 1882. The cold and majestic voice was still echoing in the main hall. Qin Shan was so angry that his face was distorted, and his eyes were filled with rage. Bastard! You're still wet behind the ears. How dare you humiliate my master? After scolding him, he glared at Huanglong Daoist and shouted, Huanglong Daoist, did you bring this person here today to humiliate me? If that's the case, don't say that I'm not giving you face. I'm going to teach him a lesson and make him kneel down and apologize. At the same time, Qin Shan suddenly waved both of his palms and blasted out 2 flaming fists toward Ji Tianqing. The strength of a Tribulation Stage 7th stage cultivator was on full display at that moment. The raging flaming fists contained destructive power. However, they were so concentrated that they did not hurt the tables and chairs in the main hall. Ji Tianqing sat on the big chair calmly. He did not even raise his hand to block the attack. Huanglong Daoist had already raised his left arm. With a wave of his wide Taoist robe, he kept the 2 flaming fists in his sleeve. The flames were extinguished instantly. The destructive power was easily neutralized by Huanglong Daoist. He looked at Ji Tianqing with anticipation and asked nervously, Master, I've been practicing the heaven and earth in the sleeve technique that you taught me back then for thousands of years. What do you think? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, you're 70% as good as me. You've reached the peak of perfection. However, you're still a distance away from perfection. It's not something that can be achieved through hard work. You also need some talent and comprehension. Huanglong Daoist looked satisfied and said excitedly, thank you for your compliment, Master. I know that I'm not very talented. I'm very lucky to be able to reach 70% as good as you. The master and disciple were discussing secret techniques in a serious manner. Qin Shan was already dumbfounded by what he saw. He was completely confused. These 2 fellows. Why are they doing this? Old Taoist Huanglong is calling that kid master? Ah. Am I hallucinating or have they all gone mad? Qin Shan felt dizzy and his mind went blank. His brain was not enough to process what was happening. At this moment, Huanglong Daoist glared at him and scolded, Qin Shan, what are you waiting for? Go get Zhao Guiyuan. Don't blame me for not warning you. If you dare to play any tricks, the Gui Yuan sect will perish today. Qin Shan was shocked and angry at the same time. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling, and his face had turned purple. However, the Huanglong Daoist had a murderous look on his face. He was definitely not joking. This was a martial sage. If he really went crazy, even if he couldn't destroy the Gui Yuan sect, he could still destroy this mountain. Thinking of this, Qin Shan could only temporarily suppress his anger. He turned around and went through the secret door in the corner of the hall, running into the depths of the palace. After passing through several winding corridors, he followed a secret passage and arrived in front of a secret room underground. The door of the secret chamber was tightly shut, and a ceiling array was set up. Qin Shan hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He waved his hand and shot out rays of golden light, knocking on the door of the secret room. Master. Disciple Qin Shan wishes to see you. Something big has happened. After a while, an old voice came from the secret room, filled with anger. Qin Shan. What is so urgent that you have to come knocking on my door? Qin Shan did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly reported, Master, the Huanglong Daoist from Jianghu mountain suddenly came. He actually rode on a black dragon and brought along a young man in a white robe. The old voice became even angrier and shouted impatiently, Bastard. What yellow dragon, black dragon, young man in a white robe? What kind of nonsense is this? Don't you know that I announced that I was going into seclusion to avoid the matter at Jianghu mountain? I have already warned you that no matter how much the Jianghu mountain begged, our sect was not to send troops to help. Otherwise, a disaster would befall us. Qin Shan hurriedly bowed and apologized. He hurriedly explained, Master, of course I understand what you mean. However, today's situation is too special. The Huanglong Daoist came aggressively. The moment he entered the hall, he knocked out 2 elders and wanted to talk to me alone. Moreover, the Huanglong Daoist was very respectful to the young man in a white robe. He respectfully addressed him as master and behaved like a disciple. The young man in a white robe was also very domineering and arrogant. He said that the Jianghu mountain had saved our sect many years ago. Now that our sect was ungrateful, he had to come personally to take back his righteousness. He even insulted Master and said that you had knelt in front of him many years ago. Qin Shan was filled with righteous indignation and emotionally recounted what had happened. However, he did not realize that the old voice in the secret room had not moved for a long time. After a long time, Qin Shan finished recounting the entire incident. He then regained his senses and hurriedly asked, Master, are you listening? The secret room was still silent and there was no movement. Qin Shan furrowed his brows and muttered to himself, Sigh, Master must have fallen asleep again. No, I have to enter the secret room and explain it to him personally. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to pull the door knocker of the secret room. At this moment, the door of the secret room opened with a bang. The sudden huge force forced Qin Shan to take 5 steps back before he could regain his balance. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes before a figure in a white robe rushed out crazily. At the same time, a pair of steel-like hands grabbed his shoulders. What did you just say? The Huanglong Daoist called the young man in a white robe master. The young man in a white robe called himself master. They were even talking about the heaven and earth sleeve. A skinny old man with white hair was grabbing Qin Shan's neck with both his hands. His eyes were wide open and he lost control of his emotions as he shouted. Qin Shan's eyes rolled back. He hurriedly pried the old man's hands away and took a few steps back. Master. Master, what's wrong with you? The white-haired old man in a white robe was the previous sect leader, Zhao. He stared at Qin Shan with a horrified expression and roared emotionally, Tell me quickly. Did you see everything just now with your own eyes? Did the young man in a white robe really say that I had knelt at his feet and vowed to be loyal to the Jianghu mountain forever? That fellow. What did he look like? Qin Shan nodded his head repeatedly. He thought for a while and gestured with his hands. That young man in a white robe was very handsome and powerful. One look and you could tell that he was not an ordinary person. He was 8 feet tall and wore a white robe and a pair of black cloth shoes. His face was handsome and cold. His eyes were like stars and his eyebrows were like swords. Zhao Guiyuan was completely stunned. He stared at Qin Shan in a daze and shook his head repeatedly. He muttered, This is impossible. It can't be him. How can there be such a miracle in the world? He had clearly been dead for 1,000 years. How can he still be alive? Qin Shan gradually calmed down. When he saw his master in a frenzy, he suddenly thought of something and his expression changed drastically. The master of the Huanglong Daoist? Isn't that the Grand Master of the Tianzhu Mountain? Jian. Kenshin. After a long while, Zhao Guiyuan took a deep breath and suppressed his shock. He asked in a deep voice, Qin Shan, think carefully. What else did the young man in a white robe say? Qin Shan hesitated for a while and stammered, he said. You. Kneel. Kneel when you enter the main hall. Hearing this, Zhao Guiyuan's body suddenly stiffened and he let out a mournful sigh. It's him. It must be him. Only he has the right to be so domineering. Qin Shan frowned and asked with a strange expression, Master, could it be that the young man in a white robe is really Kenshin? You really want to kneel when you enter the main hall? Zhao Guiyuan smiled bitterly. His eyes were filled with despair as he said in a low voice, although this sounds unbelievable, the Huanglong Daoist would never be wrong. If that young man in a white robe is really Kenshin, it's still not too late for me to kneel now. Chapter 1883. The Guiyuan Hall was completely silent. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist sat on large chairs, patiently waiting. Ji Bai and Shohei stood by the wall, continuing to act as statues. The two purple-robed elders were still lying in the main hall, unconscious. Not long after, hurried footsteps could be heard from the secret door in the corner of the hall. The white-haired Zhao Guiyuan rushed into the hall with a flustered expression, but he immediately stopped in his tracks. He took a deep breath and suppressed his nervous heart, trying his best to remain calm. As he tidied up his appearance, he anxiously looked towards the left side of the hall. His gaze swept past Huanglong Daoist and immediately landed on Ji Tianqing's body. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also raised his eyes and looked at him indifferently. Zhao Guiyuan clearly saw Ji Tianqing's face, and he also saw the coldness and dignity in his deep eyes. Zhao Guiyuan's body immediately stiffened, as if his entire body had been petrified. Although more than 1,000 years had passed, Zhao Guiyuan's memories of Kenshin had become somewhat blurry. However, when he saw Ji Tianqing gradually overlapped with the Kenshin in his memories. That figure, appearance, temperament, even the expression in his eyes were exactly the same, without a single difference. It's him. It really is him. Zhao Guiyuan's body trembled, and his heart was filled with incomparable horror. His eyes were also covered with a thick layer of reverence. 1,000 years ago, Kenshin's glory had enveloped the entire Shenwu continent, overshadowing everyone in the world, including the three martial gods. The reverence for Kenshin had long been deeply ingrained in every martial artist's soul. Even after 1,000 years, that reverence would still appear. Zhao Guiyuan was stunned in place, and his expression became complicated. The white beard on his lower jaw also trembled. He was now certain that the white-robed youth was Kenshin. This left him at a loss, and he was completely at a loss as to what to do. Ever since Kenshin had ascended, Zhao Guiyuan had been standing for more than 1,000 years. He was already used to standing. He was used to the title of Guiyuan sect master and his dignity. How difficult would it be to make him kneel now? His heart was struggling, hesitating, weighing. Qin Shan, who was standing behind him, could clearly feel the change in his emotions. His heart was also filled with anger and humiliation. For a moment, both sides were in a stalemate. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He stared coldly at Zhao Guiyuan and slowly raised his right palm. He opened his palm, and a 5-colored brilliance lit up. It broke through the dome of the main hall and flew into the mountain-protecting formation in the sky. Then, the 10 directions origin-returning formation that enveloped the entire origin-returning mountain sped up and released a destructive power. Rumble. Following a muffled explosion, the entire origin mountain began to tremble and shake violently. It was as if a super earthquake had arrived. Cracks began to appear on the mountain, and countless rocks fell from the mountain walls. Many of the palaces and mansions on the mountain peak were also shaking violently. Cracks began to appear on their surface, and countless tiles fell to the ground. Even the ground in the Origin returning hall began to crack. Many rocks and pillars fell from the dome and smashed into the hall. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoists sat there without moving. They were as steady as Mount Tai. However, Origin returning mountain was going through a calamity. The entire mountain peak was about to collapse. At this rate, the entire Origin returning sect would be destroyed in at most an hour. Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan were both dumbfounded. Both of them widened their eyes, revealing an incomparably terrified and anxious expression. Zhao Guiyuan couldn't care less about his dignity and humiliation anymore. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Your subordinate, Zhao Guiyuan, welcomes Senior Kenshin's arrival." Like a chick pecking at rice, he kowtowed 3 times in a row in fear and trepidation. Qin Shan had no choice but to kneel and kowtow like Zhao Guiyuan. At this moment, all dignity and honor were thrown out of the window. They were not as important as Origin returning sect's 1,000 years of history. However, Ji Tianqing was unmoved. The 5 fingers on his right hand were still emitting a 5-colored radiance as he controlled the entire mountain protection formation. Origin returning mountain was still shaking violently, and it was still collapsing and being destroyed. The entire Origin returning mountain was in chaos. Countless disciples were so frightened that they fled in panic. They screamed, and the screams continued to spread into the hall. Zhao Guiyuan was so anxious that his eyes turned red, but there was nothing he could do. He knew very well that if he wanted to save Origin returning sect, he could only beg for Kenshin's forgiveness. Therefore, he maintained his kneeling posture and quickly moved his knees, crawling towards Ji Tianqing. In just 10 breaths, he crawled 300 steps with his knees and arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. He cried and kowtowed as he begged for forgiveness. "Master Kenshin, please have mercy. It was me who was blind and did not know the difference between life and death. I actually angered you. Please punish me alone and let the Guiyuan sect off. I will bear all the responsibility for any wrongdoings. Please let those innocent disciples go." Ji Tianqing looked down at him and said expressionlessly, "What's the point of having a treacherous sect?" Although his tone was calm, it contained a terrifying pressure that made Zhao Guiyuan tremble. He lay on the ground in fear and repented with all his might. "I am a bastard. I was blinded by greed. I forgot my ancestors. I betrayed them. No matter how Senior punishes me, I will not complain. However, Senior, please have mercy on those innocent disciples and let them live. As long as you let Origin returning sect go, I am willing to fight for Senior with my life. I will use all of Origin returning sect's strength to fight alongside Tianzhu Mountain." Zhao Guiyuan was a smart person. He knew the purpose of the Huanglong Daoist and Kenshin's visit. He knew Kenshin's character very well. Therefore, he did not dare to play any tricks and directly expressed his attitude. Ji Tianqing stared at him coldly and asked, "You have already betrayed Tianzhu Mountain. How can I trust you?" Zhao Guiyuan quickly raised his hand to the sky and said solemnly, "I, Zhao Guiyuan, hereby swear that I will abide by the oath. I swear to be loyal to Master Kenshin and fight alongside Tianzhu Mountain. I would rather die than regret. I ask the heavens and earth to bear witness to this oath. If I go against it, I will be punished by the heavens. My body and soul will be destroyed. Origin returning sect will also be destroyed." After he finished swearing, Ji Tianqing slowly retracted his right palm and retracted the 5-colored brilliance. Immediately, the mountain protecting formation stopped operating and returned to normal. The Origin returning mountain stopped shaking, and the sounds of the mountains collapsing and the earth cracking stopped abruptly. Ji Tianqing stood up and walked in front of Zhao Guiyuan. He flicked out 2 silver water pillars with his right index finger and entered Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan's forehead respectively. The silver water pillar entered their minds and hid in their divine souls, faintly exuding a power that could destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing did not stay any longer. He brought the Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai out of the main hall. I will give you a drop of star fire seed so that you can be completely at ease. After half a month, if I do not personally take out the star fire seed, the star fire will explode and your souls will be destroyed. Chapter 1884. When he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing had already led everyone out of the hall. He summoned the black dragon and brought everyone up into the sky, quickly disappearing into the sea of clouds. In the Guiyuan hall, Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan were still kneeling on the ground, their faces ashen with despair. The stellar fire seed left behind by Ji Tianqing had made them feel completely hopeless. Originally, the two of them had planned to temporarily deal with it today. After sending Kenshin away, they would then think of a way to deal with it. But now, all their plans and fantasies had been shattered. Other than following Kenshin's orders, they had no other choice. Qin Shan cursed in a low voice, full of anger. He raised his fists and slammed them on the ground, smashing the stone floor into pieces. Ah! Damn bastard, how dare he use such despicable means to threaten us? But no matter how angry he was, it was useless. The stellar fire seed hidden in his soul made him obey obediently. Zhao Guiyuan seemed to have aged 10 years. He looked at the entrance of the hall with a blank expression and muttered to himself, how could he use such means to control us? The Kenshin of the past was the best in the world, arrogant, he didn't even bother to use such means. He has changed, the current him has become even more terrifying. After a long while, the two of them finally calmed down. Qin Shan looked at Zhao Guiyuan and asked in a low voice, Master, what should we do now? Can you take out those two stellar fire seeds? Zhao Guiyuan shook his head slowly and said with a bleak expression, Stop dreaming. How can you and I resist Kenshin's means? The only thing we can do now is to follow his orders. Only then can we protect our lives and the 1,000 years of foundation of the Guiyuan sect. Qin Shan hurriedly shook his head and said, Aren't we digging our own graves? Not to mention the various forces that are secretly targeting Tianzhu Mountain, just the 7 sects and 14 factions are enough to destroy Tianzhu Mountain. When Tianzhu Mountain is destroyed, we can only be buried with it. Zhao Guiyuan thought for a while and shook his head. Not necessarily. Don't jump to conclusions. Although we still don't understand why Kenshin, who has been dead for thousands of years, suddenly appeared. But he is Kenshin. He is the most mysterious and powerful expert in the world. He could create all kinds of miracles. With him around, perhaps the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be able to resolve the crisis and prosper again? Qin Shan looked at him in shock and said in disbelief, Master, do you think this is possible? What a fool's dream. Zhao Guiyuan said with certainty, No, you're too young. You don't understand what the word Kenshin means. Qin Shan frowned and continued to ask, Kenshin has come back from the dead, and he only has the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator. If this news is spread, it will cause a shocking flood. Master, why don't we spread this news? Maybe it'll attract all kinds of experts to besiege Kenshin and kill him. Before he could finish speaking, Zhao Guiyuan glared at him and shouted angrily, Do you have a pig's brain? Do you want to die? If we spread the news, he would kill us first and destroy the entire Guiyuan sect before the other experts come to kill him. Moreover, how do you know if the experts will kill him or pledge their allegiance and help him after the news is spread? Even the 3 martial gods owe him a favor. All kinds of heroes will respond to his call. Do you understand? Qin Shan fell silent. He did not dare to have any more fantasies. At noon, the golden sun hung high in the sky. The black dragon was speeding through the sea of clouds, rushing to the west as fast as a shooting star. Ji Tianqing and the rest stood on the dragon's back. They stood proudly in the wind, their clothes fluttering in the wind. Huanglong Daoist looked at Ji Tianqing in front of him. His face was filled with a gratified smile, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Master, your methods are too brilliant. It's simple, violent, and effective. For the past few decades, I've thought of all kinds of methods, but I couldn't make Zhao Guiyuan listen to me. But you only used an hour to subdue the Guiyuan sect and make Zhao Guiyuan listen to you. Now that the Guiyuan sect listens to us, the other two sects under the Guiyuan sect have no choice but to submit to us. Ji Tianqing looked at the sky in front of him and pondered. When he heard Huanglong Daoist's words, his lips curled into a smile. He said playfully, desperate times call for desperate measures. Most importantly, Zhao Guiyuan has not broken through to the martial sage realm. He has no right to resist. When Huanglong Daoist heard this, he quickly nodded in agreement. That's right. This is indeed the main reason. A few hundred years ago, I was still able to intimidate the 9 sects and 18 factions. They did not dare to rebel openly and would only obey in public. However, ever since the two fellows from the Battle Dragon sect and the Boundless sect reached the martial sage realm, they did not take our sect seriously. In recent years, they felt that their forces and resources were strong enough, so they dared to rebel openly. In the end, it's because there are martial sages. A cold glint flashed across Ji Tianqing's eyes. He laughed coldly, don't worry. They won't be able to jump around for long. At most, they will have to submit in 10 days. Although Huanglong Daoist felt that this was a little unrealistic, he was still full of confidence and anticipation. As long as it was Ji Tianqing who said it, he would trust him without reservation. Even if Ji Tianqing said that he could pluck the sun from the sky, Huanglong Daoist would not doubt him. In the evening, the sun was setting in the west. The black dragon flew to the top of a mountain that was more than 2,000 feet tall and gradually came to a stop. In the surrounding 20,000 miles, this mountain was the tallest and most majestic. Its aura was also the strongest. After all, this was one of the 108 mountains. It was an excellent place with spiritual veins. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the black dragon and looked down at the palace at the top of the mountain. Huanglong Daoist took the initiative to introduce, Master, this is the Wuji sect. Their attitude is the same as that of the Guiyuan sect. They will watch from the sidelines and will not help. The current sect leader is still Qi Hao. This old man is greedy for power and is unwilling to give up his position. He has been the sect leader for more than 1,000 years. Qi Hao has also passed the 8th tribulation and is trying his best to break through to the martial sage realm. His 4 disciples have also reached the 5th level of the tribulation realm and above. Ji Tianqing nodded and rode the black dragon to the top of the mountain. When the black dragon landed on the top of the mountain and was a few hundred feet away from the top, it activated the protective mountain array. A defensive light shield with a radius of 100 miles immediately appeared in the sky and covered the top of the mountain. This huge light shield was black and white. It contained the secret of yin and yang and was very powerful. The black dragon was pushed back a few hundred feet. However, it was not injured. Ji Tianqing activated the God's Eye secret technique and his eyes immediately turned golden. He stared at the black and white light shield and observed the structure of the array. After a short 10 breaths, he saw the structure of the protective mountain array clearly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a playful sneer. Ha ha ha. The Wuji sect has improved. They know to make corresponding improvements and strengthen the heaven and earth infinite array. Chapter 1885. Upon hearing Ji Tianqing's words, the Huanglong Daoist shook his head. Master, there's no need to go through so much trouble to break the formation. Let me negotiate with them. The black dragon crashed into the protective formation just now, so it will definitely attract the patrolling guards. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. At the same time, he had the black dragon transform into a pitch-black dragon-shaped sword that floated behind him. Just as the Huanglong Daoist expected, a group of patrolling guards rushed over in a short period of time. The leader of the guards was a middle-aged man with a resolute face. He brought 9 guards and flew to the front, growling with a deep voice, "Who are you?" How dare you trespass into the boundless sect? The Huanglong Daoist revealed an arrogant expression and said in a dignified tone, "Go and report to your sect master that the Huanglong Daoist from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has come to visit and has something important to ask." The faces of the guards changed, and they all bowed solemnly. "We didn't know that great immortal Huanglong had come. Please forgive us for our offense. Greetings to great immortal Huanglong." Great immortal Huanglong was famous in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Regardless of whether it was the disciples of the sect or the citizens of the city, they all had to respectfully bow and call him Great Immortal. After the guard captain bowed, he said respectfully, "Please wait here for a moment, Great Immortal. This junior will go and report to the sect master." After saying that, the guard captain turned around and flew towards the peak of the mountain to report the news. Ji Tianqing and the others stood in the sky, separated from the 9 guards by a layer of light, patiently waiting. Within the boundless sect, in the most majestic and dignified boundless palace. In a simple and elegant study, a white-haired old man wearing a green robe was sitting in front of a large table, engrossed in reading an ancient scroll. The old man was thin and had a white beard and white hair. 2 strands of snow-white hair hung down from his temples, giving him the aura of an otherworldly expert. At this moment, a middle-aged man's voice came from outside the study. Reporting to Sect Master, the Huanglong Daoist of Jianghu Mountain has come to visit. He is waiting outside the mountain protection formation. He said that he has something important to ask. The green-robed, white-haired elder was Qi Hao, the sect master of the Wuji sect. Hearing the guard's report, he quickly put down the ancient book in his hand and furrowed his brows. Old Daoist Huanglong actually came to visit our sect personally. This old fellow must be seeking help from me in order to save the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Qi Hao muttered to himself as the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Humph. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains had already declined to such an extent that it was not far from destruction. Soon, it would be destroyed by the other 7 sects and 14 factions. The reason why our sect didn't rebel because we didn't want to bear the bad reputation of being a traitor. This old man is already benevolent enough not to loot a burning house. How can I possibly help the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Isn't that courting death and being buried with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? At this point, Qi Hao made up his mind and ordered in a dignified tone, "Go and tell the Huanglong Daoist that I have already gone into seclusion and will only come out after at least 10 years. No matter what, ask him to wait for me to come out of seclusion." The guard captain outside the door immediately bowed and received the order. He said respectfully, "I understand." Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist waited patiently for the time it took to burn a stick of incense before they saw the guard captain return. The guard captain came closer and bowed to the Huanglong Daoist. He replied expressionlessly, reporting to Great Immortal Huanglong, "Our sect master has already gone into seclusion to cultivate. Our sect master wants to comprehend the divine technique and will only come out after at least 10 years. If Great Immortal has any matters, please wait for our sect master to come out of seclusion before you visit." The Huanglong Daoist originally thought that Qi Hao would meet him no matter what and would not even give him face. However, he did not expect that the other party would reply in such a way. His face immediately darkened and he scolded angrily, "Bastard. Half a year ago, this old man still had communication with Qi Hao. How could he have gone into seclusion?" The guard captain revealed a look of fear and trepidation. However, he explained in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Please calm down, Great Immortal. This matter is absolutely true. This junior is only responsible for transmitting the message and is unable to help. If there is nothing else, this junior will take his leave. Great Immortal, please go back." After saying that, the guard captain turned around and flew away with the 9 guards. The Huanglong Daoist was left in the same place. He was so angry that he frowned and a cold light surged in his eyes. Damn that Qi Hao. This old man is really capable. In the past, he only dared to obey in public but disobey in private. Now that I have personally come to see him, he dares to shut his door and refuse to see me. The Huanglong Daoist's status and authority had been greatly challenged and despised. Of course, he was full of anger. However, Ji Tianqing had already expected this result. He said calmly, "The world is fickle. Qi Hao's reaction is normal. You don't have to take it to heart. Since he doesn't know what's good for him, I will teach him an unforgettable lesson." After saying that, he activated the mystic eye technique and stared at the mountain guarding array in front of him. He formed a spell with both hands and shot out streaks of dazzling light. He poured a vast amount of five-colored Dharma power into the infinite heaven and earth array. This infinite heaven and earth array was not set up by him. However, this kind of saint-level array was not difficult for him. He only needed to spend some time to break it. As he used the mystic array technique and poured 18 streaks of five-colored Dharma power into the black and white light shield, the array's veins immediately changed. After a short 30 breaths of time, the formation was broken, and a hole with a radius of 30 feet appeared. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianqing brought Huang Long and Ji Bai Shohei into the formation through the gap. Then, they quietly landed on the peak of the mountain and hid in a forest. Ji Tianqing continued to cast spells with his palms and shot out thousands of streaks of five-colored light into the infinite heaven and earth array. Huang Long Daoist immediately guessed his intention. He asked, "Master, are you planning to control this mountain guarding array and destroy the infinite mountain to teach Qi Hao a lesson?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded. Huang Long Daoist said angrily, "Then I will help you. This time, we must destroy most of the Wuji sect. Only then can we intimidate Qi Hao." Ji Tianqing shook his head and refused his help. "You don't need to help me. Take the black dragon sword and Ji Bai and prepare to block the Wuji sect." Huang Long Daoist was startled for a moment. He quickly turned his head to look at the middle of the mountain peak and saw a few streaks of light rushing over. Obviously, Ji Tianqing's invasion and modification of the infinite heaven and earth array had alarmed the experts of the Wuji sect. Huang Long Daoist glanced over and saw 5 tribulation stage experts among the 5 streaks of light. Therefore, he grinned coldly, held the black dragon sword, and led Ji Bai and Shohei to meet them. "Let's go. Let's give them some appetizers first." After 2 breaths, Huang Long Daoist rushed to the middle of the mountain peak and landed in the square. Ji Bai and Shohei also quickly followed and stood behind him, holding the sword in their arms. Chapter 1886. The Huang Long Daoist and Ji Bai stood in the middle of the square. The 5 streaks of light flew closer and landed 100 steps away from them. Swish swish swish. A burst of multicolored light flashed, and 5 experts of different heights and sizes lined up in a row on the square. Among the 5 people, 2 of them were old men in black robes. Both of them had white hair and carried black heavy swords on their backs. The Huang Long Daoist recognized them. They were the left and right protectors of the Wuji sect. The other 3 experts in purple robes were the 3 protectors of the Wuji sect. The 5 of them looked coldly at the Huang Long Daoist with displeasure, secretly accumulating power. The left protector questioned first, "Great Immortal Huang Long, our sect master is in seclusion and can't see any guests. You actually broke through the formation and barged in. You're looking down on our sect." The right protector also echoed, "Great Immortal Huang Long, you're a respected senior. How can you do such a thing? Aren't you afraid of damaging your reputation and that of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? If you leave now, our sect can pretend that nothing happened." Before he could finish, the Huang Long Daoist sneered angrily, "Humph. You juniors still know that I'm a senior? Why don't you salute me when you see me? Furthermore, the Wuji sect is a subordinate of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I'm here to inspect the sect, but Qi Hao closed the door and refused to see me. Do you have any respect for me?" As soon as he finished speaking, he released a formless aura that spread in all directions and enveloped the entire square. Immediately, cracks appeared on the ground of the square, which had a radius of thousands of feet, along with a series of cracking sounds. The left and right protectors and the 3 elders were also suppressed by the formless aura. Their faces turned pale, and their bodies trembled. Even so, everyone clenched their teeth and endured. The left protector defended himself with a firm tone. Our sect master is indeed in seclusion. How can he refuse to see you? Great immortal Huang Long, you're using your status and strength as a martial saint to distort the truth and slander our sect master. He, slander? Huang Long Daoist immediately sneered and shouted in a low voice like muffled thunder, then this old man will show you whether Qi Hao is in seclusion or not. Hearing this, the expressions of the 5 powerhouses changed, and they all roared angrily. Huang Long Daoist, what are you trying to do? Even if you're a senior, you can't be so unreasonable. Stop. However, the Huang Long Daoist sneered at the crowd and stomped his right foot on the ground. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, shaking the heavens. At that moment, the entire everlasting mountain began to tremble violently. The ground at the peak of the mountain also began to tremble violently. With the Huang Long Daoist as the center, the ground of the entire square had completely collapsed. The cracks were like a spider web. However, this was only on the surface. The destructive power rushed into the mountain. Many of the secret chambers and underground palaces that the Wuji sect had built beneath the ground were instantly destroyed. Large cracks also appeared on the mountain walls of the everlasting mountain, and countless rocks and stones collapsed. The dozen or so palaces and residences at the peak of the mountain shook violently dozens of times. Large cracks appeared on the walls, and pillars were broken. After a full 10 breaths of time, this earthquake finally ended. The boundless sect was thrown into disarray, as if a dog was flying and a dog was jumping around. Countless disciples fled in panic and gathered together to discuss what had happened. The Huang Long Daoist stroked his beard with a smile and said with his head held high, "This old man only used 30% of his strength. This old man will stomp again every 100 breaths of time. If Qi Hao still doesn't come out, then your Wuji sect will have to find another sect." The expressions of the left and right protectors and the 3 elders instantly became extremely ugly. They were both angry and humiliated. Huang Long Daoist, you've gone too far. You want to destroy the everlasting mountain and destroy our sect's 1,000-year-old foundation? Damn it. For 1,000 years, the outside world has been saying that the Huang Long Daoist is a person of virtue, prestige, and kindness. I didn't expect you to be so despicable and bully the weak. Huang Long Daoist, even if you're a martial sage, you shouldn't humiliate our sect like this. You're forcing our sect to go to war with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Everyone cursed with righteous indignation, denouncing the Huang Long Daoist's crimes. The Huang Long Daoist was indeed an honest and kind elder. He was also a senior of virtue and prestige. What he did just now was definitely not his nature. It was only because Kenshin had returned that he had the confidence to rely on Ji Tianqing's methods. Faced with the reprimands of the experts, he retorted with a straight face, "What a joke. Back then, it was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that gave you a place with a spirit vein for you to rest and recuperate. The Wuji sect was besieged by several other sects and was almost exterminated. It was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that kept you safe until today. Today, even if I destroy the Wuji sect, I'm only taking back the territory of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. What right do you have to be angry?" The left and right protectors and the 3 elders were all red with anger and could not refute. After all, what the Huang Long Daoist said was the truth. If the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had not united the surrounding 100 million miles and arranged mountain bases for the 9 sects and 18 factions, the Wuji sect would have been exterminated long ago. If it was not for Kenshin's words, Sect Master Qi Hao would have been killed by the experts of the other sections. Even if more than 1,000 years had passed, this history could not be erased. The left and right protectors and the 3 elders could not stand on the side of reason and could only change the topic. Next, a few elders and more than 10 deacons arrived at the square one after another. Almost all the higher-ups and experts of the Wuji sect were present. Everyone was together to suppress the Huang Long Daoist. Qi Hao was the only one who did not show up. The Huang Long Daoist talked with everyone while releasing his divine sense to search for Qi Hao's traces in the mountain. Soon, 100 breaths passed. The Huanglong Daoist stomped his foot again and released 40% of his power into the Wuji sect. Boom! With a loud noise, the entire square collapsed and turned into a huge pit. This huge pit extended in all directions and covered most of the mountain peak. More than 10 palaces and houses were all tilted and on the verge of collapse. Thousands of disciples fled into the sky in panic or gathered in the open space, watching this scene with fear. The elders of the Wuji sect were infuriated when they saw how badly their sect had been destroyed. They couldn't hold back their anger anymore. Huanglong Daoist, you've gone too far. We'll fight you to the death. We'd rather die here than surrender. Huanglong Daoist, you forced us to do this. The left and right protectors, 6 elders, and 14 deacons all took out their weapons and surrounded the Huanglong Daoist. They were about to attack immediately. At this moment, a cold angry roar came from the broken palace. All of you, stop. As this voice sounded, a white-haired elder in a green robe flew over like a flash of light and landed in the square. The Huanglong Daoist sneered when he saw the green-robed elder. Chapter 1887. The green-robed old man was the sect leader of the Infinity sect, Qi Hao. He did not want to show himself and did not want to discuss the Pillar of Heaven's mountain with the Huanglong Daoist. However, he did not expect the Huanglong Daoist to change his attitude and use such a shameless method to force him to show himself. Seeing that the Wuji mountain had been destroyed, the elders and deacons of the Infinity sect were about to attack the Huanglong Daoist. Qi Hao was forced into a corner and he had no choice but to show himself. After all, the Infinity sect could not afford to offend the Huanglong Daoist. A martial sage could destroy the Infinite Mountain and kill 80% of the Infinity sect's disciples. Then, he could escape. If a fight broke out, the Infinity sect would suffer heavy losses. After Qi Hao arrived, the elders and deacons crowded around him and complained to him about the Huanglong Daoist's crimes. Sect leader, the Huanglong Daoist has gone too far. Sect leader, the Wuji mountain has been destroyed by him. We cannot let him off. The Pillar of Heaven's mountain is digging their own grave by being so aggressive. If the Pillar of Heaven's mountain is heartless, then don't blame us for being heartless. We want to leave the Pillar of Heaven's mountain too. Hearing the angry shouts of the crowd, Qi Hao waved his hand and signaled for the crowd to quiet down. The Huanglong Daoist looked at him sternly and ordered, Qi Hao, get everyone to leave. I want to settle the score with you. Qi Hao frowned and ordered, other than the left and right protectors, everyone else is to leave. The elders and deacons were unwilling to leave. However, they had to obey the sect leader's orders. Soon, the elders and deacons left. Only Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were left in the huge square. Qi Hao stared fiercely at Huanglong Daoist and asked in a deep voice, Great Immortal Huanglong, you don't have to tell me why you're here today. If you come with sincerity and have a friendly discussion with our sect, perhaps our sect will consider our old friendship and provide assistance to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to the best of our ability. But you're being rude, and aggressive. You're simply trampling on the dignity of our sect. I can tell you bluntly that now that things have developed to this stage, our sect will never reconcile with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even if you go on a killing spree here today, our sect will not comply. We will fight to the end. Even though the Boundless sect is weak, they will not tolerate humiliation. Before Huanglong Daoist could speak, a cold and dignified voice came from the ruins at the edge of the square. How dare such a treacherous and shameless sect talk about the dignity of a sect? Do you have the right to talk about integrity? The sudden voice stunned Qi Hao and the left and right protectors. The three of them were full of anger and looked coldly at the edge of the square. They saw a young man in a white robe stepping out of the ruins. He walked over 1,000 feet with each step. This person was handsome and heroic. His face was cold, and his eyes were as deep as the stars. They contained a frightening divine power. The left and right protectors frowned, and their eyes were full of vigilance. Chi Hao stared at the young man in the white robe. His eyes were as wide as copper bells, and his eyes were full of horror. His expression gradually changed, revealing a look of disbelief and shock. His entire body stiffened. After a few breaths, the young man in the white robe came to the center of the square and stood still beside Huanglong Daoist. Chi Hao came back to his senses. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. His body trembled as he exclaimed, You. How could you? He was in a mess. His mind was blank, and he almost lost the ability to think. His words were incoherent. The left and right protectors did not know the young man in the white robe. When they saw Chi Hao's frightened reaction, they felt a little strange and were secretly puzzled. The young man in the white robe was Ji Tianqing. He looked at Chi Hao indifferently and shouted in a deep voice, Evil creature, kneel down and admit your mistake when you see me. Such a familiar figure, face, and temperament. Even his eyes and voice were like that person's. Chi Hao no longer had any doubts. He exclaimed in horror, Sure enough. It's really you. How can you still be alive? Ji Tianqing frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his whole body emitted a sacred and majestic aura. It rushed toward Chi Hao like a raging wave. Suddenly, Chi Hao's body swayed like a willow in the wind. His face was pale, and he was sweating profusely. He was extremely terrified. At that moment, countless memories appeared in his mind. They were all scenes from back then. That person's peerless divine might swept through his memories like a tide, filling his mind. The reverence and fear that came from the depths of his soul made him unable to keep calm. His knees gave way, and he knelt on the ground. Thud. Chi Hao put his hands on the ground, lowered his head, and kowtowed respectfully. Chi Hao, greetings. Lord Kenshin. The left and right protectors looked at this scene with their mouths agape. They were petrified and dumbfounded. Neither of them expected that the sect master, who was full of arrogance and majesty just a moment ago, would kneel on the ground so sincerely. They also did not expect that the sect master would address the young man in the white robe as Lord Kenshin. Although they had never seen Kenshin's appearance, they had heard about Kenshin's deeds since they were young. For countless years, they had regarded Kenshin as their idol and role model, and they had worked hard to cultivate. They had also felt extremely regretful for the fall of the sword god. But now, they were seeing Kenshin with their own eyes. The left and right protectors were stunned for a moment, but they were unable to maintain their calm. They knelt down and bowed respectfully. This junior greets Lord Kenshin. Ji Tianqing ignored the left and right protectors and stared down at Chi Hao. His gaze was cold as he said in a low voice, Chi Hao, today, you have completely fallen. Thousands of years have passed, and it seems that you have already forgotten that period of time. The Boundless sect obtained a rare treasure and was attacked by the three great sections. More than half of their disciples were slaughtered, and their sect was destroyed. Let me ask you, who was it that ordered the three great sects to retreat when the Boundless sect was on the brink of destruction? Chi Hao crouched on the ground, his entire body trembling slightly, and his forehead was covered in dense beads of sweat. His expression was extremely ugly, and the expression in his eyes was complex. After a moment of silence, he replied in a hoarse voice, It was you, Senior. You were the one who protected the Boundless sect. Ji Tianqing asked in a cold voice, Let me ask you again. After the three great sects retreated, they sent out a dozen or so experts to secretly kill you and your two enforcers and steal the rare treasure. The two enforcers died in battle to protect you, and you were severely injured. Your legs were cut off, and your life was hanging by a thread. Who was the one who appeared in time, forced the three great sects experts to retreat, and personally saved your life? And who was the one who gave the Boundless sect a treasure trove of spirit veins to recuperate? Chi Hao's body stiffened, and his expression became even uglier. Cold sweat poured down his body like rain. Chapter 1888. Ji Tianqing asked 3 questions in a row, causing Qi Hao's expression to become extremely terrified. His cold and authoritative voice was like a sharp knife stabbing into Qi Hao's heart. Not only was he terrified, but he was also sweating profusely as he lay on the ground in shame. Even the left and right protectors behind him had ugly expressions, and their eyes were filled with shame. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said coldly, "Very good. No matter how much of a bastard you are, at least you haven't lost your humanity and still remember what happened in the past. Then let me ask you one last time. I was the one who gave you your life, I was the one who gave you this Wuji mountain, and I was the one who saved the entire Wuji sect. How is it that you can be so ungrateful and shameless even now? Where is your conscience? Where is your humanity?" Every single shout was like divine lightning from the 9 heavens, and it fiercely blasted onto Qi Hao's body and struck his soul. His body trembled again and again, and his expression and eyes were filled with extreme shame. He had nothing to say, and he didn't have the courage to answer these questions. He could only press his lips together and remain silent. Ji Tianqing sighed and slowly raised his hands. He said expressionlessly, "Perhaps you weren't wrong, and the Wuji sect wasn't wrong either. I was the one who was wrong. I shouldn't have saved this lowly sect back then, and I definitely shouldn't have saved an ungrateful life. Since that's the case, I will end this mistake today. The Wuji sect and you don't need to exist anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, he formed a hand seal with his hands, and thousands of streaks of 5-colored spiritual light flew into the sky and the ground. Instantly, the entire protective formation sped up, and the black and white defensive light barrier also released a 5-colored light that shot into the sky. A vast aura of heaven and earth erupted, and a terrifying amount of heaven and earth divine power surged into the Wuji mountain. The Wuji mountain began to tremble violently, and a series of earth-shattering rumbles sounded. Huge ravines began to appear on the cliffs and cliffs of the mountain. The ground at the peak of the mountain was shattering, and many palaces and residences began to collapse, sending debris and dust into the air. The Boundless Mountain's mountain protecting Grand Array actually released the power of annihilation, wanting to destroy this giant peak. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were dazed for a moment before they came back to themselves and roared in grief and indignation. "Ah! No! Lord Kenshin, please show mercy and let us go. Lord Kenshin, this junior knows his wrongs. The Boundless sect knows its wrongs." Ji Tianqing was not moved at all. His hands were still casting spells to control the protective mountain array. The everlasting mountain shook even more violently, accelerating its collapse. Thousands of disciples were fleeing in panic, screaming in fear and despair. However, no one could resist the power of the protective mountain formation, much less the divine power of heaven and earth. Everyone fell into despair, but they were unable to escape from the everlasting mountain. They could only be trapped in the array and welcome the arrival of death. Qi Hao was also in despair. His heart was filled with anxiety, worry, regret, and shame. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Too many things had happened in this short period of time. The shock and impact on him was simply too great. Now, he could no longer bear the burden. He kowtowed desperately and begged for mercy. Tears streamed down his face as he cried, "Senior Kenshin, Qi Hao knows his wrongs. I beg you, please let me live. I, Qi Hao, swear to the heavens that I will be loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains until the end of my life. I will not dare to have any other thoughts. I will live and die with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Please believe me one more time. Spare my life, and spare the Boundless sect." As he begged for mercy, he knocked his head repeatedly on the ground, shattering the stone floor. Blood also appeared on his forehead. As long as he could live, as long as he could protect the Boundless sect, he could not care less about anything else. His personal honor and the dignity of the sect were all thrown out the window. As for resisting, in front of Kenshin and the Huanglong Daoist, that was absolutely impossible. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors didn't even dare to think about it. They didn't even dare to think about it. Kenshin's might was so great that even the three martial gods paled in comparison. Who would dare to oppose him? At that moment, Ji Tianqing slowly retracted his hands and stopped channeling his techniques. The protective formation immediately stopped operating, and the boundless mountain also calmed down. Everything came to an abrupt end. Only the screams and cries of the countless disciples continued for a long time before coming to a stop. When he saw that Ji Tianqing had finally stopped, Qi Hao, who had been kowtowing and begging for mercy this entire time, finally let out a sigh of relief. His eyes revealed the expression of someone who had just survived a calamity, as if he had just walked through the gates of hell. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. "Thank you, Senior Kenshin, for your mercy. Thank you, Senior, for not killing me." He regained his composure and continued to kowtow in gratitude, not daring to complain in the slightest. The left and right protectors also kowtowed, and the fear and despair in their hearts gradually dissipated. Ji Tianqing looked at Qi Hao indifferently and said, "I gave you your life, and I can take it back at any time. I saved the boundless sect, and I can destroy it at any time. Seeing that you have repented for your mistakes, I will let you live for another half a month." Upon hearing this, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were both stunned. They did not quite understand what he meant. At the same time, Ji Tianqing raised his palms and shot out 3 silver balls of light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 silver balls of light the size of date pits quickly burrowed into the glabella of the 3 people and entered their divine souls. Instantly, the 3 of them felt their bodies turn cold, and a terrifying fire seed appeared in their divine souls. "These 3 fire seeds will hide in your divine souls for half a month. No one can take them out except for me. After half a month, the fire seeds will explode, and you will all be turned to ashes. If you don't want to die, then obediently wait for my orders." Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent. Then, he turned around and left with the Huanglong Daoist. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were stunned. Their eyes were filled with fear and despair, and their hearts sank to the bottom. The 3-star fire seeds had cut off their last hope and escape route. At this point, they had no other choice. The 3 of them came to their senses and hurriedly kowtowed to Ji Tianqing's back. They called out respectfully, "Farewell, Lord Kenshin." A moment later, after Ji Tianqing, Huanglong, and the others disappeared into the horizon, Qi Hao and the other 2 people raised their heads. The pressure that had enveloped them gradually dissipated, and the fear that lingered in their hearts also slowly receded. The 3 of them gradually calmed down and looked up at their surroundings. Seeing that the Wuxia mountain was covered in cracks and was in a mess, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors wanted to cry, but no tears came out. When they recalled what had happened in the last 15 minutes, the 3 of them still felt like a dream. Everything was unreal. Even now, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors could not believe that Kenshin, who had been dead for thousands of years, had appeared again. Such a shocking thing was simply an unprecedented miracle. A moment later, the left protector could not help but ask, "Sect Master, what should we do next?" Chapter 1889. In the middle of the night, the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and the others back to Tianzhu Mountain. After returning to Tianzhu Palace, Ji Tianqing brought Huanglong Daoist into the secret room. Ji Tianqing sat on the throne. Huanglong Daoist stood in the secret room with a gratified smile and said, "Master, now that Wuji sect and Gue Yuan sect have been subdued by you, the other 4 sects will also listen to your orders. At that time, even if the 7 sects and 14 schools attack us, we will have more help. What other orders and plans do you have?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "The 2 sects and 4 schools are weak, so the help they can provide is limited. If we want to resist the siege of the 7 sects and 14 schools, it is not enough. The key is that Tianzhu Mountain needs to improve its strength." He took out a jade slip from his interspatial ring and tossed it to Huanglong with a wave of his hand. He instructed, "The Stellar Sword Codex that I left behind all those years ago, the secret techniques and supreme techniques in it are only the initial embryonic form. In the following hundreds of years, I have perfected those secret techniques to the extreme. In this jade slip, the perfect Imperial Sword Sutra is recorded. Take it and study it well and improve your strength as much as possible. Huanglong Daoist's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "The perfect Imperial Sword Sutra? Master, after you ascended to the upper realm, you became the divine king that ruled over thousands of gods, so you have perfected the Imperial Sword Sutra into a cultivation technique for gods?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and explained, "The mysteries of sword arts are the same as the mysteries of martial arts. They are endless. However, you are still unable to cultivate the god-level Imperial Sword Sutra. The Imperial Sword Sutra that I gave you is only suitable for martial saints and martial gods. With your current strength, if you cultivate the first-generation Imperial Sword Sutra, you can only hide your sword in the void and control 9 swords. If you can cultivate the perfect Imperial Sword Sutra, not only will you be able to hide your sword in the void, but you will also be able to control 36 swords." Huanglong Daoist's blood surged and he became more and more excited. "That's great. The Imperial Sword Sutra that Master created is definitely the #1 secret technique of sword arts in the world. Master, please put it down. Disciple will definitely do his best to comprehend it and definitely won't disappoint Master." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Go and cultivate. I still have many things to do." Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and bowed, "Disciple obeys." "Don't worry, Master. Disciple has already arranged spies and scouts to monitor the movements of the 7 sects and 14 factions. If they attack, we will receive the news immediately." In addition, the elders of our sect will also try to reinforce the formation. The disciples will also try to heal their injuries and recover their strength as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood and waved his hand to signal him to leave. After the Huanglong Daoist left, he was the only one left in the secret chamber. Only then did he reveal a grave expression and frown. "I was able to subdue the Gue Yuan sect and the Wuji sect today because Zhao Gue Yuan and Qi Hao had not broken through to the martial sage realm. They had no right to resist. Moreover, these 2 sects are indebted to me. They fear my might back then, which is why they submitted so easily. However, the 7 sects and 14 factions have 2 martial sages and they have the right to resist. Even if I appear to suppress them, my strength is only at the peak of the crossing calamity stage. My deterrence is greatly reduced." Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he had an idea. "I have to find a way to perform the Armillary Heaven's secret skill and merge my aura with the heavens and earth. Only then can I hide my strength and not let the martial sages see through me." The Armillary Heaven's secret skill was an ancient secret skill from the Antiquity Age. It had been lost for thousands of years. Back then, he had accidentally obtained 2 pages of a cultivation technique in a secret realm. Only then did he learn the Armillary Heaven's secret skill. Later, he found the complete incantation of the Armillary Heaven's secret skill in the Dragon Realm. Only then did he master it. The effect of this god-level secret skill was far from just hiding one's strength and realm. It had many other uses. Even in the upper world, he would often use it. However, Ji Tianqing only had the strength of the crossing calamity stage. Even if he had the complete incantation of the secret skill in his memory and countless cultivation experiences. However, he did not have enough strength to perform the Armillary Heaven's secret skill. If I reach the martial sage realm, I can perform the god-level secret skill in advance. Now, I can only find another way and borrow the divine power of the heavens and earth. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing walked out of the secret room and came to the dojo at the peak of the mountain. He walked to the foot of the sword steel and said to Burial of Heaven with his divine thought, "Burial of Heaven, you have to help me." The pitch-black sword steel shone with a faint fluorescent light. It was surrounded by 5-colored spirit chi. Burial of Heaven's deep voice sounded in his mind. "What do you need me to do?" "I want to activate the Armillary Heaven formation. With the formation and your help, I can perform the Armillary Heaven's secret skill." Burial of Heaven thought for a while and said in a low voice, You are weak now and your identity has been exposed. You do need the Armillary Heaven's secret skill to hide your true realm. The Armillary Heaven formation should also be activated. Not only can it protect the dojo, but it can also help me recover my strength quickly. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else and stepped into the night sky. After 9 steps, he was already high up in the sky and stood at the top of the sword steel. He sat cross-legged at the top of the sword steel and slowly raised his palms. Then, he began to cast a spell. Swish. Swish. As his palms moved quickly, they flew up and down, left and right, drawing thousands of mysterious trajectories in the night sky. Dazzling 5-colored spiritual light flew out of his fingertips and landed in the surrounding dojos. At the same time, large ancient seal characters would appear in the night sky around him. It was a secret seal that could gather boundless magic power and activate the power of the heaven and earth and the Great Formation. At the same time, the 1,000-feet sword steel also released a 5-colored spiritual light that poured down like a waterfall and into the dojo. About 100 breaths later, Ji Tianqing's secret technique was finally completed. He sat on the sword steel with a solemn expression. His left hand formed a seal and pointed to the night sky, while his right hand formed a seal and pointed to the ground. At this moment, the night sky was clear and there were stars shining brightly. There was also a bright moon that shone down its moonlight for hundreds of millions of miles. Ji Tianqing's left hand activated the power of the stars, causing specks of silver light to fall from the night sky and sprinkle on the dojo like rain. His right hand poured boundless magic power into the dojo like a water column. The Burial of Heaven also released a boundless power and poured it into the dojo. The dojo within 100 miles was immediately enveloped by the brilliance of the stars and magic power. The ground was covered with a layer of 5-colored spiritual light. The densely packed patterns of the formation also lit up as if they were alive. Boundless magic power flowed among the hundreds of millions of patterns and quickly spread in all directions. The night sky was dark and silent. Time passed silently. In the entire dojo, there was only Ji Tianqing alone. No one came to disturb him. About 2 hours later, the 100-mile dojo was covered with spiritual light. The hundreds of millions of patterns all lit up with starlight. A vast power that encompassed the heaven and earth was born in the dojo. It spread in all directions and was about to cover the entire pillar of heaven's mountains. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.